6 months doesn't sound like much when you say it out loud. It's easy to brush it off. Half a year. It goes by fast. But if you really think about it, 180 days is a lot of time when you actually use it properly. It's enough time to break habits that have been running your life for years. Enough time to change how you think, how you act, how you spend your time. The problem is, most people don't notice how they're spending those days. They just kind of drift through them. One day blends into the next. Wake up, scroll, work, distract yourself, sleep, repeat. Nothing dramatic, nothing obviously wrong, but nothing really changes either. And that's how people stay stuck without even realizing it. It's not usually one big mistake, it's just small things, repeated every day. Choosing what's easy instead of what matters. Putting things off, letting your mood decide what you do. Filling your time with distractions because it's more comfortable than sitting with your thoughts. You don't feel like you're ruining your life in the moment, but over time, those patterns start to shape everything. And then months pass, sometimes years, and you're in the same place, wondering why nothing feels different. At some point, you start to realize it's not about motivation. Motivation comes and goes. Some days you feel like doing everything, other days you don't even want to get started. If your life depends on that, you'll always be inconsistent. What actually changes things is when you stop relying on how you feel. When you decide you're going to do certain things no matter what. Even when you're tired, even when you're bored, even when you'd rather do something easier. That's where things start to shift. And it's not some dramatic moment either. It's subtle. You just start catching yourself more. You notice when you're about to waste time. You notice when you're making excuses. You notice when you're avoiding something you know you should do. And instead of going along with it like usual, you interrupt it. You choose differently. Not perfectly, not every time, but more often than before. You don't need to fix your entire life overnight. You don't need some perfect plan. You just need to start moving in a different direction and keep going, day after day. Because once you do that, things start to build. You feel a bit more in control, a bit more focused, a bit less reactive, and that starts to affect everything else. You don't have to sit here and watch this like it's something you need to study, just let it play. Put it on while you're doing something else, while you're working, cleaning, walking, training, whatever you're doing. Let it run in the background. The goal isn't to memorize anything. It's just to let these ideas stay in your head long enough to actually influence you. Because the truth is, 6 months from now, you're going to be somewhere either way. Time is going to pass whether you use it or not. The only real question is what version of you shows up at the end of it. So don't overthink this. Just start listening. And more importantly, pay attention to what you do after. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. The man behind these words, William Ernest Henley, was not living an easy life when he wrote them. He had been suffering from a serious illness for years, something that would eventually lead to the amputation of one of his legs. He spent long stretches of time in hospitals, surrounded by uncertainty, surrounded by people who were also struggling, surrounded by the constant presence of pain that didn't disappear when the day ended. There was no guarantee of recovery, no clear sense of stability, no comfortable path forward. From the outside, It would have been completely understandable for him to give in mentally, to become bitter, to see himself as someone defeated by life. And yet, instead of surrendering, he made a decision that most people never make. He decided that even if his body was weakened, even if his circumstances were harsh, his inner world would remain his own. This is where the poem becomes something deeper than motivation. It becomes a standard. Life does not move according to fairness. It does not organize itself around your expectations. It does not pause to make sure you are ready before it introduces difficulty. Things happen suddenly. Situations change without warning. You can plan carefully and still be thrown into something you didn't see coming. You can do everything right and still face consequences that feel undeserved. This is part of being alive, and no amount of preparation removes it completely. Pain enters your life at some point, whether you invite it or not, and when it does, it brings with it pressure that most people are not prepared to handle. What most people do in those moments is completely natural, but also completely limiting. They begin to shrink internally. Their thinking becomes narrower. Their focus shifts entirely to what is happening around them. They replay the situation, they question why it happened, they look for someone or something to blame, and slowly, without realizing it, they give control away. Their emotions begin to follow the situation. If things improve, they feel better. If things get worse, they feel worse. Their state becomes dependent on circumstances, and because circumstances are unstable, they become unstable with them. This is how people lose themselves without even noticing it. They don't collapse all at once, they drift. The mindset behind Invictus moves in a completely different direction. It does not deny reality, and it does not pretend that pain isn't there. It acknowledges everything fully. It sees the situation clearly, without distraction, without illusion, without trying to soften it. But at the same time, it refuses to hand over authority. It creates a separation between what is happening and who you are. That separation is everything. Because once you understand that your internal state does not have to follow external events, you gain a level of control that most people never experience. You can be in a difficult situation and still remain steady. You can feel pressure without being consumed by it. You can experience pain without allowing it to define you. This is what it means to be unconquerable. It does not mean that nothing touches you. It means nothing owns you. There is a center inside you that remains intact, regardless of what is happening outside. Most people never develop that center because they are constantly adjusting themselves to match their environment. They wait for things to calm down before they feel stable. They wait for approval before they feel confident. They wait for certainty before they take action. And because life rarely provides those conditions consistently, they remain in a constant state of hesitation, always reacting, never fully in control. The Invictus mindset removes that dependency entirely. It does not wait for life to become easier. It does not require things to go smoothly before you step into strength. It starts from the understanding that difficulty is part of the path, not a deviation from it. That understanding changes everything, because once you stop expecting life to cooperate, you stop being surprised when it doesn't. And when you are no longer surprised by difficulty, you are no longer shaken by it in the same way. You meet it differently, you stand differently, you respond differently. There is a quiet kind of strength that develops from this way of thinking. It shows itself in how you carry yourself when things are uncertain. It shows itself in how you think when pressure builds. It shows itself in the decisions you make when it would be easier to step back or avoid responsibility. This strength is built in moments where no one is watching, in situations where you could have given in but chose not to. Each time you choose to remain steady, something inside you becomes more solid, more reliable, more independent from whatever is happening around you. This is why trying to make life easier is not the answer. You can spend years trying to arrange everything in your favor, trying to eliminate discomfort, trying to create a situation where nothing challenges you, and you will still be vulnerable. Because the moment something unexpected happens, all of that comfort disappears, and you are left without a foundation. But if you focus on becoming stronger instead, something changes. You no longer depend on circumstances to feel stable. You carry that stability with you. It becomes part of your identity, something that stays with you regardless of the situation. And this is the real meaning behind those final words. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. It is not a statement about controlling everything that happens in your life. It is a statement about controlling yourself within everything that happens. It is about understanding that while you cannot dictate every outcome, you can always dictate how you stand, how you think, how you move forward. That control is always available, even in the worst conditions, even in moments where everything feels uncertain. You don't reach that state by waiting for life to become easier. You reach it by becoming stronger than what life presents to you. And once you begin building that strength, you start to notice something shift. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable. Moments that once triggered hesitation begin to feel like opportunities to stand firm. You're no longer shaped by what happens to you. You are shaping yourself through it. And over time, that changes not just how you experience life, but who you become within it. There is a moment in every person's life where everything could change, and it has nothing to do with luck, opportunity, or timing. It comes down to a decision that most people avoid for as long as they can. That decision is to stop blaming, not partially, not when it feels convenient, not when things are going well, but completely. This is where the Invictus mindset truly begins, because as long as blame exists in your thinking, control does not. Blame might feel justified, it might even be accurate, but it keeps your focus locked onto something outside of you, and whatever your focus is attached to, your power follows. The moment you place responsibility outside yourself, you also place your ability to change outside yourself. That is why so many people stay stuck for years, not because they lack intelligence or effort, but because they are looking in the wrong direction. Most people carry a set of beliefs that feel natural, almost automatic, because they have been repeated for so long. They say things like, "My past defines me," as if everything that has already happened has permanently shaped who they are allowed to become. They look at their experiences, especially the painful ones, and turn them into limits instead of lessons. They begin to see themselves through the lens of what went wrong, what was missing, what could have been different. Over time, this becomes identity. They stop seeing possibility because they are constantly referencing what has already been written. The past becomes something heavy that they drag forward into every decision, every attempt, every new situation, and without realizing it, they continue reinforcing the same patterns they want to escape. Another belief sits just beneath that one, and it sounds like this: people made me this way. It points outward. It names others as the source of pain, of insecurity, of limitation. It brings up parents, environments, relationships, moments where something happened that left a mark. And again, there is truth in it. People do influence you, environments do shape you, experiences do leave an imprint. But when that belief becomes the center of your thinking, it quietly removes your authority over your own development. It creates a story where you are reacting to what has already been done to you, instead of actively shaping who you are becoming. It keeps you tied to something that no longer exists, except in your mind. Then there is the belief that feels the most practical, the most logical. My situation limits me. This one sounds reasonable because it points to real constraints. Financial pressure, lack of opportunity, difficult surroundings, responsibilities that cannot be ignored. These are not imagined. They are real factors that make progress harder. But when this belief becomes dominant, It closes off creativity, initiative, and movement. It turns obstacles into walls instead of challenges to navigate. It trains you to wait instead of act. And waiting becomes a habit that slowly drains your sense of agency until you begin to feel like you are simply existing within your circumstances rather than influencing them. The shift into absolute responsibility cuts through all of this at once. It does not argue with the past, it does not deny the role of other people, and it does not ignore the difficulty of your current situation. It simply refuses to let any of those things decide your direction. It brings your focus back to the only place where change is possible, which is your response. You cannot go back and alter what has already happened. You cannot control every person or every event around you, but you can decide how you think about what happened, how you carry it forward, and what you do next. That is where control lives, and once you place your attention there, everything begins to open up. Your standards become your anchor. Instead of reacting based on how you feel in the moment or what the situation seems to demand, you begin to operate based on a clear internal code. You decide how you behave regardless of pressure. You decide how you speak, how you act, how you move forward, even when it would be easier to do something else. Direction replaces confusion because you are no longer drifting between reactions. You are choosing a path and continuing on it, even when conditions are not ideal. This creates a sense of stability that does not depend on external factors. It comes from knowing that you are directing yourself. Responsibility, when seen this way, stops feeling heavy. Most people avoid it because they associate it with pressure, with obligation, with the weight of having to carry everything alone. But when you actually take full responsibility, something unexpected happens. You feel lighter because you are no longer waiting. You are no longer hoping that something changes before you can act. You are no longer stuck analyzing who is at fault or what should have been different. All of that disappears, and what remains is clarity. This is yours to deal with. This is yours to move through. This is yours to improve. That clarity gives you energy because now every step you take matters. There is a difference between explaining your life and owning it. Explaining focuses on reasons, on causes, on circumstances that led you here. It can be detailed, logical, even accurate, but it often keeps you in the same place. Owning your life shifts the focus forward. It asks what you are going to do with everything you have, not why things turned out the way they did. When you stop explaining, you stop justifying inaction. You stop building stories that make your current position feel permanent. You begin to see everything as material to work with, rather than something that defines your limits. Replacing why me with what now seems simple, but it changes the entire direction of your thinking. Why me looks backward. It searches for fairness, for explanations, for meaning in what has already happened. It often leads to frustration because the answers rarely satisfy. What now looks forward. It accepts the situation as it is and immediately begins searching for movement. It asks what can be done, what can be improved, what the next step is. It shifts your mind into action. Over time, this becomes automatic. You encounter a problem, and instead of getting stuck in analysis, you move toward a solution. When you treat every problem as yours to solve, you step into a different role in your own life. You are no longer someone waiting for things to be fixed. You are the one fixing them. This does not mean you have all the answers immediately. It means you take ownership of finding them. You become resourceful, you become persistent, you start looking for ways forward instead of reasons to stay where you are. This approach builds confidence, not the kind that comes from temporary success, but the kind that comes from repeated proof that you can handle difficulty. This way of thinking changes how you see obstacles. They stop feeling like interruptions and start feeling like part of the process. Each challenge becomes something that strengthens your ability to think, to adapt, to act under pressure. You begin to trust yourself more, because you have seen yourself handle situations that once felt overwhelming. That trust is built through action, through responsibility taken consistently, not through waiting for the right moment. Taking responsibility also changes how you relate to failure. Instead of seeing it as something that happened to you, you see it as something you can learn from directly. You analyze your decisions, your approach, your effort. You look for what can be improved. This keeps you moving forward, even when outcomes are not what you expected. You are no longer discouraged in the same way, because you are focused on progress, not perfection. Over time, this builds a sense of control that does not depend on external validation. You operate with a level of independence that most people never reach, simply because you have taken full ownership of your direction. Taking responsibility is the point where everything begins to change. It is the moment where you stop being shaped by what happens and start shaping yourself through what happens. It is not a single decision made once. It is something you reinforce every day, in small moments and large ones, in how you think and how you act. And as you continue to choose it again and again, you begin to notice that your life starts to respond differently. Because when you take responsibility, you take control. Emotional mastery begins at a point where most people misunderstand what strength actually looks like. They imagine a person who feels nothing, someone cold, distant, unaffected by anything that happens around them. A person who feels nothing has not mastered themselves, they have numbed themselves. Real control is something far more difficult. It is the ability to feel everything fully and still remain in command of your actions. It is standing in the middle of pressure, with fear present, with doubt present, with discomfort present, and still choosing your direction deliberately. That is a completely different level of discipline, and it is what separates reactive people from those who are truly in control. Most people never develop this because their emotions decide everything for them before they even realize it. Fear enters, and hesitation follows immediately. Opportunities appear, but instead of moving forward, they pause, overthink, and eventually step back. The decision feels logical in the moment, but it is driven by avoidance. Anger works in a similar way. Something triggers them, and the reaction comes instantly. Words are said, actions are taken, and only afterward do they realize they were not in control of themselves. Anxiety creates a different pattern. It builds slowly, filling the mind with possibilities, most of them negative, until action feels too heavy to take. So they avoid, they delay, they convince themselves that waiting is the smarter choice, while in reality they are being held back by a state they never questioned. And then there is comfort, the most subtle of all. It does not feel like a problem, it feels safe, familiar, easy to stay within. But over time it becomes a trap. It keeps people in the same place, repeating the same patterns, avoiding the discomfort required for growth. When you look closely, you begin to see that many people are not making decisions. They are following emotional patterns. The feeling comes first, and the action follows automatically. There is no space between them, no pause, no awareness, just reaction. And because of that, their lives begin to reflect those patterns. Fear limits what they attempt. Anger damages relationships and opportunities. Anxiety prevents movement. Comfort slows progress to a near stop. They may believe they are in control, but their behavior tells a different story. The Invictus mindset introduces a completely different approach. It does not try to eliminate emotions because that is not possible, and it is not even desirable. Emotions carry information. They signal what matters, what feels threatening, what feels uncertain. The goal is not to remove them. The goal is to remove their authority. You can feel fear without obeying it. You can feel anger without acting on it. You can feel anxiety without stepping back. You can feel the pull of comfort and still choose to move forward. This is what it means to feel everything and obey nothing. It creates a separation between the emotion and the action, and within that separation lies control. This idea connects directly to a deeper principle that has been understood for centuries, even if most people do not apply it in their daily lives. There is a difference between what happens inside you and what you choose to do with it. The internal experience is not always under your control. Thoughts appear, emotions rise, reactions begin to form. But what you do next is where your authority exists. When you act purely based on impulse, you are allowing internal states to dictate your behavior. When you pause and choose your response, you are exercising self-mastery. This shift is subtle at first, but it changes everything over time. Learning to pause is one of the most powerful skills you can develop, and it sounds simple until you try to apply it consistently. In a moment of pressure, everything moves quickly. Your mind reacts, your body responds, and the urge to act immediately feels strong. Pausing interrupts that pattern. It creates space. Even a few seconds of awareness can prevent a reaction that you would later regret. It gives you time to see what is happening inside you instead of being carried by it. At first, this pause feels unnatural. It feels like you are holding yourself back. But with practice, it becomes automatic, and in that pause, your control begins to grow. Observing your emotions instead of identifying with them is another shift that takes time to develop. Most people do not say, "I feel anger." They say, "I am angry." It becomes part of their identity in that moment. The emotion takes over completely, and everything they think and do follows it. When you begin to observe instead, something changes. You notice the emotion as something passing through you, not something that defines you. You can feel it without becoming it. This creates distance, and in that distance, you regain the ability to choose how you respond. The emotion is still there, but it no longer controls your behavior in the same way. Acting based on principle rather than impulse requires clarity about who you are and how you want to operate. Principles are stable. They do not change based on mood or situation. When you have them clearly defined, they guide your actions even when emotions are intense. You may feel pressure, but your standards remain. You may feel doubt, but your direction stays the same. This consistency builds strength over time because you are no longer reacting randomly. You are moving according to something solid, something you have chosen consciously. This process is not easy. There will be moments where emotions feel overwhelming, where the pause disappears, where you react before you can think. That is part of the process. What matters is what you do afterward. You reflect, you adjust, you become more aware of the pattern. Each time you do this, you improve your ability to handle the next situation. Over time, the gap between emotion and action becomes wider, and within that gap, your control becomes stronger. As this develops, you begin to notice changes in areas that once felt difficult to manage. Situations that used to trigger immediate reactions start to feel different. You experience the same emotions, but they do not carry the same force. You are able to remain steady where you would have been pulled in different directions before. This steadiness is not the absence of feeling. It is the result of control. It allows you to think clearly, to act deliberately, and to remain consistent even when circumstances are not. This is where emotional mastery begins to shape your life in a visible way. Your decisions improve because they are not rushed. Your relationships improve because you are not reacting impulsively. Your progress becomes more consistent because you are not stopping every time discomfort appears. You start to trust yourself more because you know that even under pressure, you will not lose control completely. That trust becomes a foundation you can rely on. There is a direct connection between emotional control and freedom. When your emotions dictate your actions, your life follows patterns you did not choose. You move based on fear, avoidance, or comfort, and those patterns limit what you experience. When you take control, those limits begin to fade. You are able to act in ways that align with your goals, even when it feels difficult. You are able to stay consistent, even when motivation, drops. You are able to face situations that once felt overwhelming without stepping back. At a deeper level, this is what determines how you experience life itself. Two people can face the same situation and have completely different experiences, not because the situation is different, but because their internal responses are different. One reacts, becomes overwhelmed, and loses direction. The other remains steady, processes what is happening, and continues forward. The difference is not external, it is internal. And that internal difference is built through emotional mastery. If your emotions control you, then your life will follow whatever direction those emotions take. You will move when they allow you to move, stop when they tell you to stop, and react in ways that you later question. But when you take control of your responses, something shifts. You are no longer pulled in every direction. You choose your direction. And that choice, repeated over time, is what creates a life that is stable, deliberate, and strong. There comes a point where strength is no longer about how you start, but about how long you can continue without losing yourself. This is where endurance becomes the defining factor. Not the kind of endurance that simply pushes through for a short burst, but the kind that holds its shape over time, even when everything feels uncertain. Life has a way of testing people in ways they did not prepare for. It introduces failure when you expected progress, rejection when you expected recognition, loss when you felt secure, isolation when you thought you had support, and uncertainty when you were finally starting to feel stable. These moments are not rare exceptions. They are built into the structure of life itself. No one moves forward without encountering them, and yet most people are caught off guard every time they appear. The reason this happens is simple. Deep down, many people expect life to become easier as they move forward. They believe that if they make the right decisions, work hard enough, and stay consistent, there will come a point where things settle into a smoother path. They expect resistance to decrease, for obstacles to become smaller, for progress to feel more natural. And when that expectation is not met, when difficulty continues to appear in different forms, something inside them begins to weaken. They start questioning their direction. They start doubting their efforts. They begin to feel like something is wrong, not realizing that what they are experiencing is part of the process itself. This expectation of ease is what causes people to break. Not the difficulty itself, but the mismatch between what they expected and what actually happens. When you expect something to be easy and it turns out to be hard, the experience feels heavier, it feels unfair, it feels like you are doing something wrong. That feeling slowly drains your energy and your willingness to continue. But when you remove that expectation completely, when you understand that difficulty is not a sign of failure, but a constant part of movement, your perspective shifts. You stop being surprised by resistance. You stop seeing obstacles as interruptions. You begin to see them as part of the terrain. The Invictus mindset accepts suffering as part of the path without turning it into something dramatic or overwhelming. It does not glorify it, but it does not avoid it either. It understands that anything meaningful requires pressure, and that pressure often feels uncomfortable. Growth is not a smooth process. It stretches you, challenges you, forces you to adapt in ways that feel unfamiliar. If you try to avoid that, you stay where you are. If you move through it, you begin to change. This understanding removes a lot of unnecessary struggle because you are no longer fighting the presence of difficulty itself. You are working within it. Pain in this context becomes something that can be used. It is still uncomfortable, still difficult to face at times, but it is no longer meaningless. It carries potential. The same experience that pushes one person backward can push another forward, and the difference is not in the experience itself, but in how it is interpreted. One person sees failure and concludes that they are not capable. Another sees failure and looks for what can be learned, what can be adjusted, what can be improved. One person experiences rejection and withdraws, while another uses it as a signal to refine their approach. The situation is the same, but the outcome is completely different. This is where interpretation becomes critical. The way you understand what is happening determines what you do next. If you see difficulty as something that blocks you, you stop. If you see it as something that builds you, you continue. This does not mean ignoring the discomfort or pretending that everything is fine. It means recognizing that the discomfort has a role in your development. It is part of what shapes your ability to handle more, to think more clearly under pressure, to act even when things are not ideal. Building tolerance for discomfort is one of the most practical ways to strengthen this mindset. It involves deliberately placing yourself in situations that are not easy, situations that require effort, focus, and persistence. This can be physical, mental, or emotional. It can be something as simple as continuing a task when you feel like stopping, or something more challenging that pushes your limits. Each time you stay with the discomfort instead of escaping it, you increase your capacity. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once caused hesitation becomes something you can move through. Doing hard things deliberately creates a form of training that prepares you for moments you cannot predict. When difficulty appears unexpectedly, you are not encountering it for the first time. You have already developed the ability to stay steady, to continue, to work through resistance. This reduces the impact of those moments because they are no longer unfamiliar. You recognize the feeling, and instead of reacting to it, you move with it. This is how endurance is built, through repeated exposure to challenge combined with the decision to continue. One of the biggest obstacles to this process is the habit of escaping struggle. It shows up in many forms, some obvious, some subtle. Distraction is one of the most common. When something feels difficult, it is easy to shift attention to something more comfortable, something that requires less effort. This provides temporary relief, but it also weakens your ability to handle pressure over time. Avoidance works in a similar way. Tasks are delayed, decisions are postponed, challenges are left unresolved. This creates a cycle where difficulty is never fully faced, and as a result, it grows in the mind. Breaking this pattern requires awareness and action. You begin to notice when you are moving away from discomfort instead of through it. You catch the moment where you are about to step back, and instead, you stay. You complete the task, you face the situation, you deal with what is in front of you. Each time you do this, you reinforce a different pattern, one where you move toward challenge rather than away from it. Over time, this becomes your default response. As this continues, your identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to avoid difficulty and start seeing yourself as someone who is built through it. This shift is important because identity influences behavior. When you believe that you are someone who can handle pressure, who can endure, who can continue even when things are hard, your actions begin to reflect that belief. You approach situations differently. You carry yourself differently. You do not hesitate in the same way because you trust your ability to stay steady. This does not mean that everything becomes easy. It means that you become more capable. The challenges remain, but your relationship with them changes. You no longer see them as threats to your progress. You see them as part of what creates your progress. This reduces fear and increases confidence, not because the future is certain, but because you know you can handle what comes. Endurance is what turns potential into something real. Many people have the ability to achieve more, to grow, to develop into stronger versions of themselves, but they stop too early. They encounter resistance and step back. They face difficulty and change direction. They begin something and do not carry it through to the end. Over time, this pattern limits what they become, not because they lack potential, but because they do not stay with the process long enough to realize it. When you develop endurance, this changes completely. You continue where others stop. You stay consistent where others become inconsistent. You move forward when progress feels slow. This accumulation of effort over time creates results that are not visible in the short term, but become undeniable in the long term. It builds strength, skill, and confidence in a way that cannot be rushed. Endurance separates those who imagine what they could be from those who become it. There is a final stage that begins to take shape after everything you have built starts working together, not as separate ideas, but as a single way of living. It does not arrive all at once. It forms gradually through repeated choices, through moments where you could have gone back to old patterns but didn't, through situations that tested you and revealed that something inside you has changed. This stage is what most people imagine when they hear the word untouchable, but they misunderstand what it actually means. Being untouchable does not mean that problems disappear. It does not mean life suddenly becomes smooth or predictable. Difficulties still appear. Pressure still exists. Uncertainty does not go away. What changes is not the world around you, but the way you stand within it. There is a level of internal stability that cannot be easily shaken, something steady that remains even when everything outside feels unstable. This stability is not based on confidence alone, and it is not based on temporary motivation. It is built from the integration of everything that came before. Responsibility gives you direction because you no longer look outward to decide what to do. Emotional control gives you consistency because your actions are no longer dictated by shifting feelings. Endurance gives you strength over time because you continue even when progress feels slow or difficult. When these three come together, they form something much stronger than any single trait. They create a person who is not easily influenced, not easily discouraged, and not easily thrown off course. As this state develops, you begin to notice that things which once had a strong effect on you start to lose their impact. Criticism, for example, begins to feel different. Before, it might have caused doubt, hesitation, or the need to defend yourself. You might have replayed it in your mind, questioned your actions, or adjusted your behavior to avoid it in the future. Now it no longer carries the same weight. You can hear it, evaluate it, take what is useful, and leave the rest without it affecting your sense of direction. It does not control how you see yourself. It does not interrupt your progress. It becomes information, not something that defines you. Fear also begins to change its role. It does not disappear, but it no longer has authority over your decisions. You feel it when you are about to step into something uncertain, when you are facing something that matters, when the outcome is unclear. But instead of stopping you, it becomes something you move through. It signals that you are stepping into something that requires attention, not something that requires retreat. Over time, this changes your relationship with challenges. You no longer avoid them in the same way, because you are not waiting for fear to disappear before you act. Failure loses its weight in a similar way. It no longer feels like a final judgment or something that defines your ability. It becomes part of the process, something that provides feedback rather than something that shuts you down. You move forward faster because you are not held back by the emotional impact of things not going as planned. You adjust. You continue, you refine your approach. This creates a kind of momentum that is difficult to stop because it is not dependent on perfect outcomes. It is built on consistent movement. External chaos also begins to lose its control over you. Situations can still be unpredictable, people can still behave in ways you do not expect, Events can still disrupt your plans, but these things no longer determine your internal state. You are able to remain steady even when things around you are not. This does not mean you ignore what is happening. It means you do not let it dictate how you think, how you feel, and how you act. There is a separation between the external and the internal, and that separation gives you a level of freedom that most people never experience. This leads to a noticeable shift in behavior. You begin to act without needing approval. Decisions are no longer filtered through the question of how others will respond. You are not constantly adjusting yourself to fit expectations or avoid judgment. This does not make you careless or disconnected from others. It makes you clear. You know why you are doing what you are doing, and that clarity removes the need for constant validation. You are able to move forward without hesitation because your direction is not dependent on external confirmation. Remaining steady under pressure becomes natural rather than forced. Situations that would have previously caused stress or confusion are handled with a sense of calm. You take in what is happening, process it, and respond without losing control. You also begin to move with a stronger sense of direction. There is less wandering, less second-guessing, less shifting between different paths. Your actions align more closely with your intentions, and your progress becomes more consistent as a result. You are not constantly starting and stopping. You are not easily distracted by temporary emotions or external noise. You continue forward step by step with a focus that becomes sharper over time. At this stage, the words from the poem take on a different meaning. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. They are no longer something you repeat for motivation. They describe how you operate. You understand that you cannot control everything that happens in your life, but you also understand that your response is always within your control. That understanding is no longer theoretical. It is something you live through your actions every day. Most people spend their lives trying to control what is outside of them. They try to manage situations, influence people, avoid uncertainty, and create conditions that feel safe. But the more they focus on controlling the external, the more they feel affected by it, because the external is never fully stable. It changes, often without warning, and when it does, it disrupts everything that was built on it. The Invictus individual moves in a different way. Instead of trying to control everything outside, he focuses on controlling himself, his thoughts, his actions, his direction. This creates a form of stability that does not depend on circumstances. It stays with him regardless of what is happening around him. And because of that, he is not easily shaken. He is not easily influenced. He is not easily stopped. That is what makes him untouchable. You wake up and reach for your phone before your feet touch the floor. Notifications pull you into the day before you even remember your own thoughts. The mind barely gets a moment of silence before the world starts pouring itself into you. Clips, messages, headlines, noise. You scroll without thinking, consuming information you don't care about from people you don't know for reasons you can't explain. It feels normal because everyone else is doing it, but deep down, you can sense something is wrong. There's a heaviness in your mind, a fatigue you can't wrest away, a constant feeling that your attention is leaking out of you. This isn't weakness. This is overstimulation, your brain being hit with more input in a single morning than previous generations absorbed in an entire day. Most people think they lack discipline, focus, or motivation, but the truth is simpler. Their brain is overloaded. Your mind isn't broken. It's overwhelmed. It was never built for endless novelty, flashing screens, and the pressure to absorb more than you can process. Dopamine isn't the problem. The rate at which you force your brain to release it is. Every tiny piece of content gives a small spike. Every spike teaches your mind to expect more. And the more you expect, the less you can tolerate silence, boredom, or stillness. Your attention gets fragmented into tiny pieces, scattered across 1,000 micro-stimulations. You try to focus, but your brain is still searching for the next quick hit, the next notification, the next distraction. This is not random, this is a loop, and your mind is trapped in it. The most dangerous part is that you don't notice it happening. It feels harmless because every moment of consumption is small. A video here, a message there, a scroll without intention, seconds at a time. But every one of those seconds teaches your brain the same lesson. Stay distracted, stay stimulated. Don't stop, don't slow down, don't be still. Over time, this becomes a mental trance, the consumption trance, where your mind is constantly busy, constantly active, constantly reacting, but never actually thinking. You're awake, but not present, alert, but not aware. You're drowning, not in information, but in distraction. The more you consume, the further you drift from yourself. What makes this crisis so dangerous is that it steals the one thing you need to build a real life: control over your own attention. Without attention, you can't create, reflect, or make meaningful decisions. You can't build discipline or stay focused long enough to change your life. You're not choosing your actions anymore. Algorithms are choosing them for you. And the longer you live this way, the harder it becomes to return to yourself. But the truth is that escape isn't impossible. There are habits that break the loop, habits that interrupt the trance, habits that force your brain to stop consuming. They're not gentle, they're not comfortable, but they work, brutally and instantly. There is a point where the brain becomes so flooded with stimulation that it forgets how to simply exist. Most people don't realize how overstimulated they are until the moment they try to sit quietly. The second everything stops, the scrolling, the noise, the notifications, something strange happens. They feel uncomfortable, restless, anxious. Their mind starts pulling at them like a child needing attention. They want to stand up, check their phone, fiddle with something, look at a screen. They can't bear the absence of input because their brain has been trained to expect constant entertainment, constant novelty, constant dopamine. This is why the stillness block is so powerful. It interrupts that training completely. The stillness block is simple. For 10 to 20 minutes each day, you sit in absolute silence. No phone, no music, no background noise, no stimulation of any kind. Just you, your breathing, and your mind. It sounds easy when you hear it, but the moment you try it, you realize how deeply you depend on consumption to distract you from yourself. The first time you attempt stillness, your brain will fight you. It will try to escape, to wander, to beg for stimulation. You'll feel a rush of thoughts. You'll feel impulses to grab your phone reflexively, even though you have nothing to check. You may even feel bored, a feeling modern people almost never experience anymore. That discomfort isn't failure. It's the proof that your brain has been conditioned to run away from silence. Silence is not empty. Silence is where the mind resets. Silence is where the nervous system recalibrates. Silence is where thoughts become clear. But when your brain is used to constant input, silence feels threatening. It feels like withdrawal because in a very real way, it is. You're taking away the rewards your brain has been trained to expect. This is why the first few sessions of stillness can feel strange. The discomfort is your brain detoxing from overstimulation. The fog begins to lift, but not without resistance. And yet, if you stay with the discomfort, without escaping, without grabbing your phone, without seeking stimulation, something powerful happens. Your brain begins to adapt. Neurologically, stillness resets dopamine levels. When you're constantly consuming, your dopamine spikes in tiny bursts all day long. Each spike teaches your brain to expect more stimulation, but when you sit still, those spikes stop. The brain has no choice but to begin recalibrating. The receptors stabilize, the reward system quiets down. Instead of craving micro hits of novelty, the brain settles into a more natural rhythm. This brings a calmness that many people haven't felt in years, a clarity that comes only when the mind finally stops chasing stimulation. Stillness isn't just a break from consuming, it's a full neurological reset. But the power of the stillness block is not only scientific. There's a philosophical dimension to silence that ancient traditions understood long before modern neuroscience existed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." And he wrote this while ruling an empire, surrounded by political noise, war, responsibility, and constant demands. He knew that real strength comes from the ability to return to oneself, to sit with the mind and not be controlled by it. Stillness is not laziness. Stillness is discipline. Stillness is mastery. In Zen Buddhism, there is a saying, "Sit and let everything settle." They compare the mind to a jar of muddy water. When you keep shaking it, meaning when you keep consuming, scrolling, reacting, the water stays cloudy. Nothing is clear. But when you stop shaking it and let it sit, the dirt settles to the bottom. Clarity returns. Stillness is the act of letting the dirt settle. It is the moment when your thoughts stop spinning wildly and begin to organize themselves naturally. Zen monks train this for years because it is the foundation of calm awareness. You don't need to be a monk, but you do need to give your mind time to settle. Taoism also speaks of stillness as a source of strength. The Tao Te Ching says, "To the mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders." This doesn't mean the world suddenly becomes easy. It means when the mind stops racing, problems become smaller, clearer, and easier to face. Noise exaggerates everything. Silence puts everything back in proportion. Taoism teaches that nature moves effortlessly, not through force but through calm, steady flow. Stillness helps you reconnect with that natural state, the state where your mind becomes an ally instead of an enemy. After a week of daily stillness, most people notice a shift. Their thoughts become less frantic, their impulses weaken, they become more aware of how often they reach for their phone without reason. Their inner world becomes quieter. They begin to think more deeply, not just reactively. Small problems feel less overwhelming. They become more present, more observant, more grounded. This isn't spiritual nonsense. It's what happens when the brain is allowed to return to its natural rhythm. You are built for silence. You are wired for moments of calm. But you cannot access that calm if you never disconnect from input. Stillness also reveals something most people never face, what's actually happening inside their mind. When you sit quietly, thoughts you've been avoiding begin to rise. You remember tasks you've ignored, emotions you haven't processed, problems you've been pushing aside. This is why people fear silence. It forces them to confront the truth they've been running from. But confronting these thoughts isn't punishment, it's liberation. You cannot fix what you refuse to face. Stillness gives you the opportunity to face it gently, without distraction. Even boredom becomes powerful here. Boredom is not a sign of emptiness. It is the first layer of the mind settling. It means your brain has run out of stimulation to cling to. After boredom comes clarity. After clarity comes insight. And after insight comes focus. Stillness is the bridge that connects a chaotic mind to a disciplined one. You cannot build discipline if you cannot sit with your own thoughts. You cannot build focus if you cannot endure 10 minutes without stimulation. Stillness is the training ground for attention, and the beauty is, anyone can do it. You don't need a special environment, you don't need equipment, you don't need knowledge or experience. You just need the courage to stop. You need the willingness to sit with yourself. 10 minutes a day is enough to begin rewiring your brain. 20 minutes accelerates the process dramatically. Over time, the stillness becomes something you crave, not because it stimulates you, but because it restores you. It becomes the calm center you return to when the world becomes loud. There is a point where you realize the stillness block is more than a habit. It's a reset button for your entire life. Once your brain learns how to exist without constant input, everything becomes easier. Focus becomes easier. Thinking becomes easier. Reading becomes easier. Creating becomes easier. Even your emotions become easier to understand. The mind needs space to organize itself, and stillness gives it that space. You may not realize it now, but the ability to sit quietly for 10 minutes is one of the purest forms of strength. It means you are no longer controlled by impulses. It means you are no longer afraid of your own thoughts. It means your attention belongs to you again. And once you regain control over your attention, you regain control over your life. Stillness forces your brain to stop consuming because it removes every path of escape. For the first time in perhaps years, the mind is alone with itself. No input, no stimulation, no distraction, just truth, just presence, just you. And ironically, it's in that empty space, the silence you once feared, that your mind finally begins to heal. This is the reset. This is the break in the loop. This is the first habit that gives you your brain back. Most people don't realize that the reason they feel mentally scattered isn't because their life is complicated, but because their brain is constantly switching between tasks. Modern life teaches you to do everything at once: text while you eat, scroll while you watch something, jump between apps, check notifications while you work, respond to messages while you walk. None of these seem harmful in the moment, but they fragment your attention into dozens of tiny pieces. You're never fully present in anything you're doing, and you rarely finish a task with full clarity. What feels like staying busy is actually just micro-consumption. Every switch is a small dose of novelty, and every dose reinforces the same addiction: stimulation over focus. Multitasking sounds impressive, but it's one of the most damaging habits for the human mind. The brain cannot do two demanding tasks at the same time. What it actually does is rapidly switch back and forth, which feels fast but is extremely inefficient. Each switch creates a trail of leftover thoughts and unfinished neural pathways, what psychologists call attention residue. It means every time you shift from task A to task B, part of your mind stays stuck in task A, draining your energy, reducing your clarity, and lowering your performance. After enough switches, your mind becomes foggy, tired, and easily overwhelmed. You don't feel scattered because your life is chaotic. You feel scattered because your brain is constantly being pulled in multiple directions. This is why single tasking is such a powerful habit. It does the opposite of what multitasking does. Instead of scattering your mind, it unifies it. Instead of fragmenting your thoughts, it brings them into one clear line. When you focus on one task at a time, your mind enters a deeper state of concentration. The distraction, noise, and background cravings for stimulation begin to fade. The brain uses less energy yet becomes far more effective. The feeling is calm but powerful, like suddenly remembering what it feels like to actually think. You begin to realize how rare true focus has become in your daily life. Think about the last time you did something with full attention. No phone nearby, no music, no switching, just doing one thing. Maybe it was writing, maybe cleaning, maybe reading, maybe even walking. In those moments, time feels different. You're not rushing. You're not overstimulated. There's a steady rhythm, a quiet immersion. That's the natural state of the brain. The mind was designed for deep, singular engagement. Single tasking is not about going slow. It's about going deep. And depth is where all meaningful work happens. The reason multitasking is addictive is because each switch gives a tiny burst of dopamine. The brain sees novelty and thinks it's important. It rewards you for checking, switching, reopening apps, glancing at your phone. Over time, the brain becomes conditioned to look for the next micro hit of stimulation. This is why you feel the urge to check your phone even when nothing is happening. This is why you open new tabs without thinking. Why you jump between tasks before finishing them. It's not lack of discipline. It's a neurological loop built by repetition. Single tasking breaks that loop by starving the brain of unnecessary novelty. When you stop jumping between tasks, the brain stops expecting constant stimulation. It relearns how to settle into deeper focus. Attention residue is what keeps the mind feeling cluttered throughout the day. For example, imagine you're working on something and a notification pops up. Even if you only glance at it for 2 seconds, part of your attention stays stuck on it. Your mind opens a mental thread, a kind of unfinished tab. When you return to your original task, you're not coming back to it cleanly. You're coming back with residue, tiny pieces of your mind still processing the interruption. Multiply this by dozens or hundreds of switches per day, and the mental clutter becomes overwhelming. Multitasking drains you not because the tasks are hard, but because the constant shifting never gives your mind time to reset. Single tasking eliminates residue. When you are fully immersed in one task, the brain doesn't need to divide itself. There are no leftover fragments pulling your attention backward. You finish tasks faster, you make fewer mistakes, you remember things more clearly, you feel less mentally tired even after hours of work. Your mind becomes sharper, calmer, and more resilient. This is how single tasking rebuilds your brain, by returning it to the rhythm it was designed for. One of the biggest consequences of multitasking is that it makes boredom intolerable. When your brain gets used to switching constantly, it becomes addicted to the dopamine spikes that novelty brings. When there's no novelty, the brain becomes restless. This is why people instinctively reach for their phones at the smallest hint of silence. Single tasking helps reverse this. By training the mind to stay with one task, even when it's not exciting, you rebuild your boredom tolerance. And boredom tolerance is one of the most underrated forms of mental strength. People who cannot endure boredom cannot endure silence, cannot endure focus, and cannot endure the discomfort of growth. Single tasking strengthens all of these abilities. There's also a deeper psychological impact. When you multitask, you never fully commit to anything. You're always halfway present, half working, half scrolling, half listening, half thinking about something else. Over time, this creates a subtle sense of emptiness, a feeling that you're drifting through tasks without truly engaging with them. Single tasking reverses that emptiness. It brings intention back into your actions. When you give something your full attention, you feel more grounded, more connected, more capable. You begin valuing the task in front of you, not as something to rush through, but as something to complete fully. Single tasking also trains your brain to stop seeking novelty. When you focus on one thing for extended periods, the brain adapts. It stops craving quick rewards and starts valuing sustained effort. You build a kind of mental endurance that makes everything easier: working, reading, exercising, learning, conversations, even resting. The brain becomes calmer because it's no longer chasing stimulation like a hungry animal. It settles, it stabilizes, and it becomes more disciplined. To build single tasking into your life, you need simple, consistent exercises. One exercise is the focus block. Choose one task, set a timer for 25-30 minutes, and commit to doing nothing else until the timer ends. No checking your phone, no switching, no responding to distractions. If your mind wanders, gently bring it back. Another exercise is the one-tab rule. When working, only allow one browser tab open at a time. This forces you to stay on one thing instead of jumping around. A third exercise is the mono-action habit. Whenever you're doing something, eating, walking, cleaning, do only that. No videos, no music, no background scroll, just the task. At first it may feel strange or slow, but within a few days, you'll notice your thoughts becoming clearer. You'll finish tasks faster. You'll feel less mentally drained. Your attention will feel stronger, like a muscle that's finally being used the right way. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Your brain stops craving chaos and starts preferring depth. You begin to enjoy the feeling of being fully immersed. You begin to appreciate the calmness that single tasking brings. The real magic of single tasking is not that it makes you more productive. It's that it makes you more present. You stop rushing mindlessly through your day. You stop splitting your mind into pieces. You stop being controlled by stimulation. You gain something most people have lost: control over your own attention. And once your attention belongs to you again, every part of your life becomes easier to manage. You think better. You feel better. You make better decisions. You live with more clarity. Single tasking is not merely a technique. It is a way of reclaiming your mind from the chaos of modern stimulation. It is a declaration that your attention is valuable, your focus is sacred, and your mind is not designed to be pulled in 1,000 directions. When you train yourself to focus on one thing at a time, you're not just building discipline, you're rebuilding your brain from the inside out. There is a level of mental clarity most people will never experience in their entire lives, not because it's difficult to find, but because it requires something modern humans are terrified of. A full day without input, not an hour, not a half day, not a morning without your phone, an entire 24 hours with absolutely no digital stimulation, no YouTube, no social media, no news, no podcasts, no audiobooks, no background videos, no endless scrolling, no screens feeding you information. For one full day, the inflow stops completely. Your mind is no longer receiving new content. It is left alone with its own thoughts for the first time in years. Most people cannot imagine going 24 hours without input because the thought alone exposes how dependent their minds have become. The brain has been trained to rely on constant stimulation, a steady drip of novelty, distraction, entertainment, noise, and opinions. The instant you remove this stream, the mind panics. It suddenly has nothing to cling to, nothing to chew on, nothing to drown in. The initial discomfort is intense because the mind is going through withdrawal. It's like taking sugar away from someone who's been consuming it every day. The body doesn't react with calmness, it reacts with urgency. This is exactly why the 24-hour input fast works. It shocks the system. It cuts off the dopamine supply. It forces the mind to face itself, not the next video, not the next swipe, not the next headline. And this shock is what breaks the consumption trance. You begin to realize how deeply addicted you were, not to content itself, but to never being alone with your thoughts. The fast exposes the dependency, and once it's exposed, you can finally take control of it. During the first couple of hours of an input fast, the mind reaches for its habitual coping mechanisms. You'll instinctively reach for your phone, even though there's nothing to check. You'll think about opening apps you promised not to use. You'll look for excuses, just one video, just one quick scroll. These impulses rise automatically because your brain is expecting its usual dopamine hits. When you deny these impulses, the brain becomes restless. You may feel bored, irritated, uneasy, or strangely uncomfortable. This is not a failure, it's the detox beginning. After the initial discomfort, something begins to shift. The mind gradually loses its urge for constant stimulation. The craving fades. The noise inside your head begins to quiet down. What replaces it is awareness of your thoughts, your emotions, your surroundings. You start noticing things you normally ignore: the sound of your footsteps, the feeling of air on your skin, the texture of nature, the presence of silence. What was once overwhelming becomes refreshing. There is a moment, sometimes within hours, sometimes later in the day, when you realize your mind is actually settling. The restlessness weakens, the urge to consume fades, the mental fog begins to lift. This is the dopamine reset at work. When you remove all external input for an extended period, the brain recalibrates its reward system. Instead of expecting constant novelty, it begins to adjust to the absence of it. Dopamine receptors stabilize. They become sensitive again. You begin to experience satisfaction from simple things: walking, thinking, writing, noticing your breath, sitting quietly. The natural rewards of life become meaningful again because the artificial spikes of digital stimulation are no longer overpowering them. People who complete a full 24-hour input fast often describe the same experience. I didn't realize how loud my mind had become until the noise stopped. And the noise isn't just digital noise, it's the internal noise that digital stimulation creates. The buzzing thoughts, the racing mind, the scattered attention, the constant urge to check something, the inability to stay still. When the input stops, the internal noise begins to dissolve, and what remains is something many people haven't felt in a long time: mental space. This mental space is where real thinking happens. Not reactive thinking, not shallow thinking, not fragmented thoughts. Real thinking, the kind you can't access when your mind is constantly being interrupted by information. When you remove external input, your mind finally has the room to process your life, your direction, your decisions, your problems, your dreams. Suddenly, the thoughts you've been avoiding for months or even years start rising to the surface. The mind begins organizing itself. You begin to understand things that felt confusing before. You see patterns you missed. You notice truths you've ignored. This is the real power of the input fast. It gives you back your inner world. It reconnects you to your own thoughts, not the thoughts of 1,000 strangers. You stop absorbing other people's voices, opinions, and emotions, and you begin hearing your own voice again. In a world saturated with input, your own mind becomes the last place you ever visit. The input fast forces you to return to it. A full day without content also reveals how much of your life is consumed passively. Most people are not tired from doing too much. They're tired from consuming too much. Their brain is exhausted from jumping between videos, conversations, notifications, and digital noise. They confuse rest with numbing themselves. They mistake distraction for relaxation. But during an input fast, you learn the difference. Real rest feels quiet, steady, peaceful. Consumption feels loud, fast, and draining. Once you feel the contrast, it's impossible to unsee. Throughout the day, your activities shift from passive consumption to active presence. You walk without headphones. You sit without checking anything. You let your eyes rest on the world around you. You pay attention to your breathing, your posture, your thoughts. You might write in a notebook just to release thoughts that have been stuck in your mind. You might take a long walk, not to exercise, but to think. You might simply sit somewhere and observe the world. These activities sound simple, even boring, but when the mind is detoxing from stimulation, they become powerful tools for clarity. As the day goes on, many people experience a sense of calm they haven't felt in years. There is no urgency, no rush, no compulsion to check anything, no feeling that you're missing out. You become grounded. The absence of input becomes comforting instead of uncomfortable. You begin to realize that life feels slower, clearer, and more meaningful when you're not constantly escaping from it. What surprises most people is how much time suddenly appears. A day without input feels longer, but not in a bad way. It feels spacious. It feels like you're living inside time instead of racing through it. You notice how much of your day is usually filled with content that adds nothing to your life. Without it, you feel lighter. You feel more in control. And without realizing it, you start enjoying the simplicity of doing nothing. By the end of the 24 hours, something shifts inside you. The mind feels clean, almost like a mental reboot. The constant cravings for distraction weaken significantly. The compulsive checking stops. Your thoughts feel sharper, deeper, more intentional. You feel more connected to yourself. The dopamine reset has taken effect. And for many people, this one day becomes a turning point. They realize they don't need constant input. They realize silence is not scary. They realize their mind works better when it's not drowned in noise. This habit is simple, but it is not easy. It forces you to confront your own mental habits and addictions. It requires patience, discipline, and honesty. But it is incredibly powerful. This one habit alone can give you your mind back. It can restore your ability to focus, to think, to feel, to reflect, to live. It can break the cycle of consumption in a single day. It can reset your brain in a way nothing else can. This is not about rejecting technology or living like a monk. It's about giving yourself one day, just one, to remember what it feels like to be fully human again, to exist without constant stimulation, to reconnect with your own thoughts, to break the addiction to consumption. The 24-hour input fast is a reset button for your entire mental system, a day where your mind finally gets the silence it's been begging for. There's a moment after stillness, after silence, after you stop consuming, where your mind becomes open in a way that feels unfamiliar. It's a space most people never enter because they go right back to their phones the second the quiet ends. But this moment is the doorway to transformation. The mind isn't cluttered, it isn't overwhelmed, it isn't running from anything, it's simply ready. And what you do in that space determines whether you remain a consumer or become something more. The creator ritual begins here. It's not about talent, it's not about perfection, it's not even about producing great work. It's about shifting your identity from someone who absorbs information to someone who generates it. The rule is simple. After any moment of stillness, you create. It could be one page of writing, one paragraph of reflection, or one drawing, one idea, one improvement to your life or environment, one step toward a goal. It doesn't matter what it is. It only matters that you produce something, anything, that didn't exist before. Creation is the antidote to consumption because it forces your brain into a completely different mode. Consumption is passive. Creation is active. Consumption pulls your attention outward. Creation pulls your attention inward. Consumption scatters your mind, creation organizes it. The shift from absorbing to producing is not just behavioral, it's neurological. When you create, your brain forms new pathways. You switch from dopamine-driven novelty seeking to focus-driven engagement. You begin training the mind to build rather than escape. The human brain is wired for agency. Agency means you choose your actions instead of reacting to whatever stimulation appears in front of you. When you sit down and decide to create something, even something tiny, you reclaim agency from the digital world. You're no longer drifting through content. You're directing your energy towards something intentional. Even the smallest act of creation sends a powerful message to your subconscious: I am in control. Agency is one of the most powerful psychological forces on earth. People feel depressed, anxious, or lost not because their lives are empty, but because they feel powerless. They feel like life is happening to them instead of being shaped by them. Creation dissolves that powerlessness. Every act of creation, no matter how small, is a way of saying, I can shape my reality. That is the beginning of self-respect. That is the beginning of confidence. That is the beginning of change. Creation also builds discipline in a way that feels natural, not forced. When you create consistently, you train your mind to commit, to focus, to stay with a task even when it's not easy. Discipline is not formed through punishment or guilt. It's formed through repetition of meaningful action. When you show yourself that you can produce something even on the days when you don't feel like it, your brain begins to trust you. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself, it's about proving to yourself that you keep your own promises. The creator ritual becomes a daily promise to step into your potential. Meaning is another byproduct of creation. People search for meaning in books, quotes, movies, endless videos, but meaning is not found in consumption. Meaning is built through creation. When you write something, you understand your thoughts more deeply. When you draw something, you see the world differently. When you generate ideas, you begin to understand what matters to you. When you improve something in your environment or your life, you experience direct influence over your world. Creation gives life weight. It gives your days direction. It takes the abstract idea of purpose and turns it into something you can see and feel. Creation also improves focus. The brain can only concentrate deeply when it is doing something active. When you create, your mind enters a state of engagement that consumption can never give you. This is why, after creating, even for 5 minutes, you often feel more awake, more present, more centered. The brain thrives on tasks that require attention and effort. Creation gives it that. It's like sharpening a dull blade. Every moment you spend producing instead of consuming sharpens your ability to think clearly. The creator ritual is deceptively simple. Most people underestimate the power of tiny acts of creation because they think change requires grand gestures. They think transformation comes from massive goals, all-or-nothing plans, or perfect conditions. But identity shifts begin with small, consistent actions. When you write a single paragraph, you're becoming a writer. When you sketch even one line, you're becoming an artist. When you generate one idea, you're becoming a thinker. When you improve one thing in your environment, you're becoming a responsible, intentional human being. You don't wait to become a creator, you become one through repetition. To integrate the ritual into your daily life, pair it with moments of stillness. After 10 minutes of silence, your mind will feel open. Don't waste that openness by going back to consumption. Fill it with something you create. If you're unsure what to write, simply write about what's in your mind. If you don't know what to draw, sketch a simple shape or scene. If you don't know what idea to generate, reflect on something that matters to you. If you don't know what to improve, look around your space and change one thing, organize, adjust, clean, fix. Creation doesn't need to be artistic, it simply needs to be intentional. Over time, the ritual becomes addictive in the best way possible. You begin craving the clarity that creation brings. You begin respecting the version of yourself who produces instead of consumes. You begin to see your own thoughts as valuable. Something shifts internally. You no longer look at the world as a spectator. You look at it as someone capable of contributing. You begin seeing potential everywhere. Ideas, projects, improvements, expressions. Consumption feels empty, creation feels alive. One of the most profound transformations happens inside your identity. Every time you create, you are sending a message to your unconscious mind. I am someone who builds. I am someone who shapes. I am someone who makes things real. Over time, this becomes who you are. Identity follows action, not the other way around. You don't wait to feel like a creator, you act like one, and your mind adapts. The creator ritual also breaks the consumption habit because it fills the space that consumption once occupied. When your mind is trained to produce after stillness, you no longer reach for your phone by default. You no longer crave entertainment as your first response to boredom. Instead, your brain begins asking, what can I make? What can I improve? What can I express? This shift is massive. It changes your relationship with time, with attention, with energy. You no longer feel trapped in the cycle of consuming. You feel empowered to contribute. Creation rewires the brain because it engages the parts responsible for problem solving, patience, and intentional thinking. These parts weaken when all you do is consume. But when you create, even in tiny amounts, they strengthen. They begin taking up more space in your mental life. You become more thoughtful, more observant, more inventive. You stop running from your thoughts and begin shaping them. There is a truth most people never realize. You kill consumption by becoming someone who produces, not by fighting your urges, not by forcing discipline through guilt, not by avoiding your phone with sheer willpower, but by building a life where creation feels fulfilling and consumption feels empty. The creator ritual is your doorway into that life. It's the beginning of becoming someone who lives intentionally instead of reactively. It's the shift from passive to active, from drifting to directing, from consuming life to building it. Once you step into the role of a creator, even in the smallest ways, consumption loses its power. You begin to understand that your mind was never meant to be filled endlessly. It was meant to be expressed. Most people underestimate how much their environment controls their behavior. They think their actions come from willpower or motivation, but in reality, their surroundings shape their habits far more than their intentions do. Every time you reach for your phone without thinking, every time you open a social media app out of reflex, every time you sit down to work and instantly get distracted, you're not failing because you're weak. You're failing because your environment is designed to make you fail. The world around you is filled with triggers, cues, reminders, and temptations that pull you back into the consumption loop. Until you remove those traps, every mental change you try to make will be 10 times harder. The environment purge is about taking control of the physical and digital spaces that shape your daily behavior. It's not just about being organized or having a clean desk. It's about removing the invisible hooks that drag your attention backward. Your phone is the biggest hook of all. It's not evil, but it's engineered for distraction. Even when it's off, even when it's silent, even when you're not using it, the mere presence of your phone nearby changes the way your brain works. Studies show that when a phone is within reach, even face down, your mind becomes partially preoccupied. A part of your attention stays on it, waiting for something to happen. This silent tug is enough to weaken your focus. This is why one of the core steps in an environment purge is physically moving your phone away from where you think. If you're writing, leave it in another room. If you're working, put it in a drawer or behind you. If you're trying to focus deeply, put it somewhere you can't see it. Out of sight truly does mean out of mind. When your phone is not visible, your brain stops expecting stimulation. When it's out of reach, the automatic reflex of grabbing it disappears. This one change can completely shift the quality of your focus. But the phone is only one piece of the puzzle. Your digital environment is an entire world of temptation, and most people never bother to clean it. The apps you use daily, the ones you open mindlessly, are often the greatest source of mental chaos. Deleting these apps might feel extreme at first, but it's one of the fastest ways to free your attention. If something keeps pulling you into consumption, remove it entirely. Delete the apps you waste the most time on. Remove shortcuts from your home screen. Uninstall unnecessary notifications. Your digital world should serve you, not enslave you. Blocking websites is another part of the purge. If there are sites you visit without thinking, news feeds, social media, entertainment, endless scrolling platforms, use blockers to cut access during work or thinking hours. It's not about restricting yourself forever. It's about building an environment where the path of least resistance leads to clarity, not distraction. When the easiest option is to think, write, create, or act, not to consume, you begin forming habits that support who you want to become. Your physical environment matters just as much. A cluttered room or workspace is a silent form of overstimulation. Every object in your field of vision makes a demand on your mind. Every unorganized corner steals a fragment of your attention. When your environment is messy, your thoughts become messy. When your desk is chaotic, so is your mental state. Cleaning your environment is not about aesthetics, it's about freeing cognitive space. A clean desk means fewer distractions, fewer mental hooks, and a clearer place to direct your attention. This doesn't mean you need a minimalist, empty room. It means your environment should reflect the version of yourself you want to be. If you want to be focused, your workspace should support focus. If you want to be creative, your surroundings should invite creativity. If you want to feel calm, your environment should not overwhelm your senses. Most people never redesign their environment around their goals. They try to use self-control to fight against a world built to distract them. That's why they always lose. An environment purge also means reducing the amount of unnecessary stimulation in your everyday life. Your brain has a limited capacity to process input. The more stimulation you surround yourself with, the more overloaded you become. This applies to sound, visuals, clutter, movement, and even people. A noisy room makes it hard to think. A space filled with constant motion makes it hard to stay still. An environment filled with notifications, sounds, and background noise makes it almost impossible to feel grounded. Reducing stimulation allows your brain to breathe. When the world around you quiets down, your inner world becomes sharper. One of the most powerful parts of the environment purge is the idea that your environment is always training you. Every room you sit in is teaching you a habit. Every object within reach is pushing you toward or away from the life you want. If your phone is near you, your brain is being trained to reach for it. If your desk is messy, your brain is being trained to accept disorder. If your room is filled with distractions, your brain is being trained to avoid deep focus. If your environment is chaotic, your mind becomes chaotic too. But the reverse is also true. A clean, intentional space trains your brain to think clearly. A desk with only essential tools trains your mind to work deeply. A space free from digital noise trains your attention to stay grounded. The environment is not neutral. It is shaping you constantly. When you remove temptations from your environment, you stop relying on willpower. Willpower is fragile. It fades throughout the day. It breaks under stress. It collapses under overwhelm. But an environment that supports focus does not require effort. It makes discipline natural. It makes distraction difficult. It turns the path toward clarity into the easiest path. This is how you create consistency, not by forcing yourself to fight temptation, but by removing temptation altogether. The more you purge your environment, the more you realize how much of your behavior was never really yours. You weren't choosing to scroll, your environment was triggering it. You weren't choosing to procrastinate, your workspace made it easy. You weren't choosing to distract yourself. Your digital world was designed to hijack your attention. When you remove these triggers, you start making real choices again. You start living intentionally. The purge doesn't need to be drastic. You don't have to throw everything away or become a minimalist monk. You just need to remove the things that pull you away from the person you're trying to become. Clean your desk, organize your room, delete distracting apps, move your phone, block websites, reduce unnecessary stimulation. Set up your environment so that clarity feels natural and consumption feels distant. Once you complete the purge, something surprising happens. You feel lighter, the mental load decreases, the urge to consume fades. You feel more in control of your day, your thoughts move more freely, you become more aware. Productivity becomes less forced and more natural. There is a psychological relief that comes from not having to fight against your environment anymore. Instead of your surroundings draining you, they begin supporting you. The environment purge is not just the removal of clutter, it is the removal of friction. It is the removal of invisible obstacles that drain your attention and energy. It is the design of a life where the environment works with you, not against you. And once you remove the temptations that used to trap you, your ability to practice the other habits, stillness, single tasking, creation, becomes 10 times stronger. They stop being uphill battles. They become effortless. This is why the environment purge is not optional. It is essential. Without it, every change you try to make is weakened. With it, every change becomes easier. Your environment is training you every day. The only question is whether it's training you to become distracted or disciplined, chaotic or calm, a consumer or a creator. Choose what your environment trains you to become. He wakes up before the alarm finishes ringing, but instead of getting up, his hand moves automatically toward his phone. The screen lights up his face, and within seconds he is pulled into something that requires nothing from him. He scrolls without thinking, not because he truly wants to, but because it feels easy. It fills the space between waking up and actually starting the day. Minutes pass, then more minutes, and he tells himself he'll get up soon, just not yet. There's no urgency, no pressure, no real reason to move. When he finally gets out of bed, it isn't because he chose to take control of the day, but because enough time has passed that staying there no longer feels justified. And even then, there is no energy behind his movement. It's slow, passive, almost reluctant. Like the day is something happening to him, rather than something he is actively stepping into. This moment is not special. It doesn't stand out. It blends into the rest of the day because the same pattern repeats itself in different forms. He chooses what feels easiest without even realizing that he's choosing. When faced with something slightly uncomfortable, he delays it. When something requires effort, he negotiates with himself until he finds a way to avoid it. He sits down to do something productive, but his attention drifts within minutes. He thinks about going to the gym, but decides that today isn't the right day. He considers taking a step forward in something meaningful, but hesitation creeps in, and suddenly it feels easier to stay where he is. None of these decisions feel important on their own. They are small, almost invisible choices that pass without resistance, and because they are small, they feel harmless. That is exactly why they are dangerous. Comfort does not come into your life as something threatening. It does not announce itself as something that will weaken you. It feels good. It feels safe. It feels like relief. It feels like something you deserve after a long day, or something that helps you relax, or something that gives you a break from effort. And because it feels good, you don't question it. You don't examine it closely. You accept it without resistance. But what starts as something occasional slowly becomes something constant. What once felt like a break becomes your normal state. And once that happens, anything outside of that comfort begins to feel uncomfortable in a way that you are no longer used to handling. The world around you makes this even easier. Everything is designed to reduce effort and remove friction. You don't have to wait for anything anymore. You don't have to struggle through boredom because entertainment is always one tap away. You don't have to deal with hunger for long because food can be delivered instantly. You don't have to sit with your thoughts because distraction is always available. There is always something ready to take away even the smallest amount of discomfort. And while that might seem like convenience, it slowly trains your mind to expect ease at all times. It begins to feel like discomfort is something that should be eliminated immediately, not something that should be faced or endured. Over time, this changes the way you respond to life. You begin to avoid things not because they are impossible, but because they are slightly uncomfortable. You delay actions not because you don't know what to do, but because doing them requires effort. You hesitate not because you lack ability, but because you have become used to choosing the easier path. And the more you repeat these patterns, the more automatic they become. You don't even feel like you are making decisions anymore. It feels like this is just who you are, like this is your personality, like this is simply how you function. But this is not your nature. This is conditioning. Your mind naturally moves toward what feels good and away from what feels difficult, but without awareness, that tendency starts to control you. It starts to guide your behavior in ways you don't notice. You begin to choose comfort without realizing that you are choosing it. You begin to avoid effort without questioning why, and slowly, these repeated choices start to shape your identity. You become someone who avoids, someone who delays, someone who prefers ease over challenge. This is how the erosion happens. It is quiet, gradual, and almost invisible. There is no moment where everything collapses. There is no clear point where you can say, "This is where I lost my strength." Instead, it happens through accumulation, through small decisions that seem too insignificant to matter, through habits that feel harmless, through choices that don't feel like choices at all. And by the time you begin to notice the effects, it feels like this is just how things are. like this is just the way your life turned out, like this is just who you became. There were people who understood this long before the modern world made comfort so accessible. One of them was Marcus Aurelius, a man who had access to everything most people chase for their entire lives. He could have lived in constant luxury without ever needing to challenge himself, but he chose to train his mind in the opposite direction. He reminded himself that ease weakens the body and the mind when it becomes the default. He practiced discipline not because he lacked comfort, but because he understood what too much comfort does over time. He did not trust the feeling of ease because he knew how quickly it could turn into dependency. He understood something that is easy to ignore in a world like this. Without resistance, there is no growth. Without challenge, there is no strength. And when those things disappear from your life, they don't just leave a gap, they get replaced by something else, by hesitation, by avoidance, by a constant need for things to feel easy before you take action. You begin to rely on comfort in the same way you would rely on anything else. You need it to feel okay. You need it to function. And when it's not there, even simple things begin to feel overwhelming. This is why small tasks can feel so heavy. This is why simple decisions can feel exhausting. This is why things you know you should do become things you keep putting off. It's not because those things are too difficult. It's because your tolerance for discomfort has been reduced. It's because you have trained yourself over time to move away from anything that requires effort. And once that becomes your default, even normal challenges begin to feel like something bigger than they actually are. And the most important part of this is understanding that this did not happen because you are lazy. It did not happen because you lack discipline as a person. It did not happen because you are incapable. It happened because you were conditioned, slowly and consistently, by your environment and your habits. You were shaped by repeated choices that felt too small to notice. You adapted to a world that constantly pulled you toward ease, and without realizing it, you started moving in that direction more and more. Every time you chose comfort, that pattern became stronger. Every time you avoided effort, it became easier to do it again. Every time you escaped discomfort, your ability to handle it decreased. And over time, these patterns became automatic. They stopped feeling like decisions. They became part of your identity. You wake up and reach for your phone without thinking. You avoid certain tasks without questioning why. You choose the easier path without even considering the alternative. It feels natural, but it is learned. You are not lazy. You are conditioned. And the conditioning runs deeper than you think. There's a reason this pattern feels so automatic, so difficult to break, and so easy to fall back into. It goes deeper than habits or personality. It is built into the way your brain works. Every time you choose the easier option, something happens beneath the surface. Your brain records that decision, it registers it as efficient, safe, and rewarding. And because your brain is constantly trying to conserve energy and avoid unnecessary strain, it begins to favor those choices more and more. Over time, this becomes a loop. Not a conscious one, but a biological one. Comfort stops being something you occasionally choose and becomes something your brain starts pushing you toward without asking for your permission. This loop is driven by reward. When you do something that feels good or requires little effort, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine. That feeling doesn't just give you pleasure in the moment. It teaches your brain that what you just did is worth repeating. It marks that behavior as beneficial. And because easy behaviors require less energy, your brain quickly begins to prefer them over anything that demands effort. This is not a flaw, it is how the brain is designed to function. It evolved to keep you safe and to help you survive, not to help you reach your highest potential. It looks for efficiency, it looks for comfort, it looks for the path that requires the least resistance. In a different environment, this system worked well. When survival required effort, when food had to be hunted, when danger was real, the brain's tendency to conserve energy made sense. But in the modern world, that same system works against you. You no longer need to struggle to survive. You don't need to push yourself physically or mentally just to get through the day. Everything is available instantly. And because of that, the brain's natural preference for ease begins to dominate your behavior. It starts choosing what is easiest, not what is best. This is where the loop begins to tighten. You scroll through your phone because it feels effortless. Your brain rewards you for it. The next time you feel even a slight moment of boredom or discomfort, your mind remembers that scrolling is an easy way out. So you do it again, and again, and again, each time reinforcing the same pathway. The same pattern forms with entertainment, with food, with avoidance. You reach for what feels good in the moment, and your brain learns to expect that response. It begins to anticipate it, it begins to crave it. Instant gratification plays a major role in this. When rewards come immediately, your brain doesn't have to wait. It doesn't have to tolerate discomfort or delay. It gets what it wants right away. And the more often this happens, the less patience your mind develops. It begins to expect results without effort. It begins to resist anything that takes time. Anything that requires consistency starts to feel unnatural. Not because it actually is, but because your brain has adapted to a different rhythm. A faster one, a shallower one. Over time, this changes your relationship with difficulty. Tasks that require focus feel harder than they should. Goals that require long-term effort feel overwhelming. Even simple responsibilities can feel heavier than they actually are. The problem is not the tasks themselves. The problem is the way your brain has been trained to respond to them. It has learned to associate ease with reward and effort with discomfort that should be avoided. And because of that, it begins to steer you away from anything that challenges you. This is why avoidance becomes so common. You don't avoid things because you are incapable of doing them. You avoid them because your brain has learned that avoiding them feels better in the short term. It reduces discomfort immediately, it removes pressure, it gives you relief, and that relief becomes its own reward. So the next time a similar situation appears, your mind pushes you toward the same response. Avoid, delay, escape. Not because it's the best option, but because it's the easiest one. This pattern shows up everywhere in modern life. Social media scrolling is one of the clearest examples. It requires no effort. It delivers constant stimulation. It gives your brain small bursts of reward without asking anything from you. Cheap entertainment works the same way. It fills your time without requiring focus or engagement. These things are not harmful on their own, but when they become your default, they begin to shape your behavior in ways you don't notice. They teach your brain to expect ease. They train you to avoid effort. Avoidance doesn't stop at small things. It spreads into areas that actually matter. You avoid difficult conversations because they feel uncomfortable. You delay important decisions because they require clarity and courage. You postpone responsibility because taking it on feels heavy, and every time you do this, you reinforce the same loop. You teach your brain that discomfort should be escaped, not faced. The more this pattern repeats, the lower your tolerance becomes. Things that once felt manageable begin to feel difficult. Things that once felt challenging but possible begin to feel out of reach. You start to doubt yourself, not because you have lost your ability, but because you have lost your exposure to difficulty. Your mind becomes unfamiliar with effort. It begins to interpret it as something abnormal, something to resist. And the longer this continues, the more fragile you become. This fragility is not obvious at first. It doesn't show itself in dramatic ways. It appears in hesitation, in avoidance, in the quiet decisions you make every day. It shows up when you choose to delay instead of act, when you choose to escape instead of confront, when you choose to stay comfortable instead of pushing forward. And because these moments are small, They don't feel like they matter, but they do. They are shaping the way your brain responds to the world. There is an important truth here that is easy to overlook. Your brain is not trying to make you better. It is trying to make things easier. It is trying to keep you safe and conserve energy. It does not care about your long-term growth. It cares about immediate efficiency, and if you don't become aware of that, you will follow its lead without realizing where it is taking you. This is why discipline becomes so important, not as a punishment, but as a counterbalance, something that interrupts the loop, something that pushes you to act in ways that your brain would not naturally choose. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus spoke about the idea that freedom does not come from indulging every desire, but from gaining control over them. He understood that constantly giving in to what feels good in the moment does not make you stronger. It makes you dependent. It ties your behavior to whatever is easiest, whatever is most comfortable, whatever requires the least effort. Real freedom comes from being able to act even when it feels difficult, from being able to move forward without needing everything to feel easy first, from being able to tolerate discomfort without immediately escaping it. That kind of freedom cannot exist in a mind that is trained to avoid effort. It requires a different kind of conditioning, one that goes against your natural tendencies but ultimately gives you control. Because when you always choose comfort, you don't just stay the same. You become more sensitive, more reactive, more dependent on things feeling right before you take action. Your range becomes smaller, your tolerance becomes lower, your ability to handle pressure decreases, and without realizing it, you become fragile. The more comfortable your life becomes, the more fragile you become. There comes a point where the effects of this pattern are no longer hidden. They stop being small, isolated moments and begin to shape the direction of your entire life. It is not something that announces itself clearly. It does not arrive as a dramatic failure or a sudden collapse. It reveals itself slowly, through what you stop doing, through what you stop chasing, through what you quietly accept. You begin to notice that you are no longer pushing yourself the way you once did. Goals that used to excite you now feel distant or unnecessary. Challenges that once felt meaningful now feel like something you would rather avoid. You start choosing what feels manageable instead of what could actually change your life. And over time, that shift becomes your reality. Avoiding difficulty becomes your default response. When something demands effort, your first instinct is to step back. You tell yourself that you will get to it later, that you need more time, that you are not ready yet, but that moment never really comes. The longer you delay, the heavier it feels. The more you avoid, the more intimidating it becomes. What once felt like a small step now feels like a huge leap, and instead of moving forward, you stay where you are, convincing yourself that this is temporary, that you will act when the conditions feel right. But those conditions rarely appear on their own. They have to be created. And when you are used to choosing comfort, you stop creating them. As a result, you begin to settle. Not in a way that feels obvious or intentional, but in a way that feels justified. You tell yourself that what you have is enough, that you don't need to push further, that chasing something bigger is unnecessary or even unrealistic. You adjust your expectations to match your current behavior. You lower your standards without realizing it, and because this happens gradually, it feels normal. It feels like maturity, like acceptance, like being realistic. But beneath that, something else is happening. You are stepping away from your potential, not because you decided to abandon it, but because you stopped moving toward it. This affects your resilience in ways that are easy to overlook. When you are not regularly exposed to difficulty, your ability to handle it weakens. Small problems begin to feel heavier than they should. minor setbacks start to feel overwhelming. Situations that require patience or endurance become exhausting. It's not because those situations have changed, it's because you have. Your tolerance has decreased. Your ability to stay steady under pressure has been reduced. And when stress appears, it hits harder than it should. Not because it is stronger, but because you are less prepared to face it. This is where stress begins to feel unbearable. You start to look for ways to remove that feeling as quickly as possible. You distract yourself, you avoid the source, you search for something that will make it go away. And in doing so, you reinforce the same pattern that created the problem in the first place. You teach your mind that stress is something to escape, not something to manage. And each time you do that, your capacity to handle it becomes smaller. Along with this, a form of dependency begins to grow. You start relying on external things to feel stable. You look for validation to confirm that you are doing well. You seek comfort to feel okay. You depend on things outside of you to maintain your state. When things are easy, you feel fine. When things become difficult, you feel lost. Your internal stability becomes tied to external conditions. And because you cannot control those conditions completely, your sense of control over your life begins to weaken. This dependency spreads into different areas of your life. You hesitate to take action unless you feel motivated. You avoid decisions unless you feel confident. You wait for the right mood, the right moment, the right conditions. And when those things are not there, you stay still. You become reactive instead of active. Your life starts to move based on how you feel rather than what needs to be done. And over time, that creates a gap between where you are and where you could be. As this continues, your world begins to shrink. You start choosing what feels safe instead of what feels meaningful. You avoid risks that could lead to growth because they come with uncertainty. You stay within familiar boundaries because they feel comfortable. You limit yourself to what you know you can handle instead of expanding into what could challenge you. And while this might protect you from failure in the short term, it also prevents you from experiencing anything that requires courage. You stop taking chances. You stop stepping into situations that could change you. You stop putting yourself in positions where you might struggle, and without those experiences, you lose the opportunity to grow. Your life becomes predictable, controlled, and limited. It feels stable, but it lacks depth. It lacks movement. It lacks the kind of experiences that shape you into something stronger. This is where the deeper consequence appears. Comfort does not just affect what you do, it affects who you become. It shapes your character. It influences how you respond to life. It determines the kind of person you are when things get difficult. And when you spend too much time avoiding discomfort, you begin to lose the qualities that are built through it. You lose patience. You lose endurance. You lose the ability to stay focused when things are not easy. You lose the strength that comes from pushing through something that challenges you. There's a reason why struggle has always been connected to growth. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke about this idea in a way that cuts through any illusion. He believed that resistance is necessary for development, that without challenge, the will becomes weaker. When life becomes too easy, the part of you that drives you forward begins to fade. You stop testing yourself. You stop expanding your limits. And without that, your potential remains untouched. He understood that strength is not something you inherit. It is something you build through difficulty, through effort, through facing things that are not comfortable and moving through them anyway. When that process disappears, something essential is lost. Not immediately, but gradually. The will becomes softer. The drive becomes weaker. The desire to push forward becomes less urgent, and eventually, you stop asking more from yourself. At this point, two different paths become clear. One path is built around comfort. It feels stable, predictable, and safe. It avoids risk. It avoids difficulty. It stays within known limits. Over time, it leads to a life that is easy to maintain but difficult to grow within. Progress slows down. Opportunities pass by. The sense of possibility becomes smaller. And even though everything might look fine on the surface, there is a quiet awareness that something is missing. The other path is different. It involves stepping into discomfort regularly. It involves choosing effort even when it feels inconvenient. It requires facing challenges instead of avoiding them. It is less predictable, less comfortable, but more alive. Growth becomes part of the process. Strength builds over time. Confidence develops from action, not from waiting. And while this path is more demanding, it leads to expansion instead of limitation. The difference between these two lives is not talent, not intelligence, not luck. It is the willingness to face discomfort. One person avoids it and slowly becomes smaller. The other moves toward it and gradually becomes stronger. The gap between them grows over time, not because one started ahead, but because one continued to push while the other stayed still. A comfortable life may feel good in the moment, but over time, it begins to lose something important. It loses depth, it loses challenge, it loses the sense of movement that comes from growing. It becomes repetitive, predictable, and limited. And eventually, it can start to feel empty. Not because there is nothing there, but because there is nothing pushing you forward. A comfortable life is often an empty one. If this pattern has been built over time, it can also be reversed over time, not through motivation, not through sudden bursts of energy, but through deliberate practice. The goal is not to remove comfort from your life completely. That is neither realistic nor necessary. The goal is to change your relationship with discomfort, to stop seeing it as something to escape and start seeing it as something you can handle, something you can move through without hesitation. This requires training just like anything else, and like any form of training, it begins with awareness. Most of the choices you make throughout the day happen automatically. You reach for the easy option without thinking. You avoid effort without noticing. The first step is to interrupt that autopilot, to bring your attention to the moment where the choice is happening. When you feel that slight resistance before doing something difficult, that is the moment that matters. That is where the decision is being made. Instead of moving past it, you pause and ask yourself a simple question. Am I avoiding this because it is hard? Not to judge yourself, not to criticize, but to see clearly what is happening. This question creates a small gap between impulse and action. It gives you the chance to choose differently. At first, you will still choose the easy option most of the time. That is expected, but the awareness begins to build. You start noticing patterns that were invisible before. You begin to see how often you step away from discomfort without even realizing it. As that awareness grows, you introduce small controlled forms of discomfort into your daily life. Not extreme, not overwhelming, but consistent. This is where the process begins to shift. You take cold showers, not because they are pleasant, but because they are not. You train your body even when you don't feel like it. You wake up earlier than you need to. You choose to do tasks you have been avoiding. Each of these actions is a signal to your mind. It tells your brain that discomfort is not something to fear. It tells your system that you can act even when things are not easy. Over time, this begins to rebuild your tolerance. What once felt difficult starts to feel manageable. What once felt uncomfortable starts to feel normal. The purpose of this practice is not to make your life harder for no reason. It is to expand your capacity, to increase the range of what you can handle without resistance. When you regularly expose yourself to controlled discomfort, your mind adapts. It becomes less reactive, it becomes more stable. You begin to realize that the feeling of discomfort is temporary, that it rises and then it fades, that it does not control you unless you allow it to. This understanding changes the way you respond to challenges. Instead of stepping back, you move forward. Instead of hesitating, you act. One of the most effective ways to accelerate this shift is to follow a simple rule: do the hardest task first. At the beginning of your day, before distractions take over, before your energy is scattered, you identify the thing you're most likely to avoid. The task that requires the most effort, the most focus, the most discipline, and you do it immediately, without negotiation, without delay, without giving yourself time to think your way out of it. This changes something fundamental. It removes the constant pressure of having that task hanging over you. It builds momentum. It creates a sense of control that carries into the rest of your day. More importantly, it begins to reshape your identity. When you consistently choose to face what is difficult first, you start to see yourself differently. You stop being someone who delays and become someone who acts. You stop relying on how you feel and start relying on what you decide. This shift does not happen overnight, but it builds quickly. Each time you follow through, you reinforce a new pattern. Each time you choose effort over ease, you strengthen that identity. To deepen this process, you introduce voluntary hardship. This is not about forcing yourself into extreme situations, but about choosing to act even when there is resistance. You train when your body feels tired. You work when your mind wants to escape. You speak when it would be easier to stay silent. You step into situations that challenge you instead of avoiding them. This creates a different relationship with discomfort. It becomes something you engage with regularly, not something that surprises you. There is a mindset behind this that has been practiced for centuries. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of doing what needs to be done without waiting for the right feeling. He understood that waiting for motivation leads to inaction, that if you only act when you feel ready, you will spend most of your time waiting. Instead, he focused on duty, on action, on moving forward regardless of internal resistance. This approach removes the need for perfect conditions. It allows you to operate consistently even when things feel difficult. At the same time, you begin to reduce the number of easy escapes available to you. You limit distractions that pull your attention away from what matters. You reduce the amount of instant stimulation you expose yourself to. You make it slightly harder to fall back into the patterns that have been holding you back. This does not require extreme measures. Small changes are enough. Keeping your phone out of reach when you work, setting boundaries around when you use certain apps, creating an environment that supports focus instead of distraction. These adjustments make it easier to stay aligned with your intentions. As you remove these easy escapes, you create space. Space where discomfort can appear without being immediately covered up. Space where you have to sit with the urge to avoid instead of instantly acting on it. This is where real change happens. In those moments where you feel the pull toward comfort and choose to stay present instead. Where you allow the discomfort to exist without escaping it. Where you take action despite it. Over time, this becomes a form of training, not just for your body but for your mind. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to see that you can handle things you once avoided. You build a sense of control that does not depend on external conditions, and this control carries into every area of your life. Work becomes more focused, decisions become clearer, challenges become manageable. The key principle behind all of this is simple. Discomfort is not something that needs to be eliminated. It is something that needs to be understood and faced. It is part of the process of growth. It is part of building strength. When you stop running from it, you start learning from it. You start using it as a tool instead of treating it as an obstacle. And as this shift takes place, something changes inside you. The things that once felt difficult no longer stop you. The resistance that once held you back becomes something you move through without hesitation. You begin to operate from a place of choice instead of reaction. And that is where real progress begins. At the beginning of this process, everything feels unnatural. Choosing discomfort feels forced. Acting when you don't feel like it feels wrong. There is resistance in almost every decision, and it can feel like you are constantly going against yourself. That feeling is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is changing. You are stepping outside of patterns that have been repeated for a long time, and your mind is reacting to that shift. It wants to pull you back toward what is familiar, toward what requires less effort, toward what feels safe. But if you stay consistent, something begins to happen that is easy to miss in the moment, but becomes clear over time. After a few weeks, the changes are small, but noticeable. You begin to catch yourself before acting on impulse. The gap between feeling and action becomes slightly wider. You hesitate for a moment before reaching for distraction. You pause before avoiding something difficult. And in that pause, you sometimes choose differently. Not every time, but more often than before. That alone begins to shift your behavior. You start acting with more intention. You are no longer moving entirely on autopilot. There is a sense that you are involved in your own decisions again, that you are choosing, even if it is still inconsistent. During this stage, nothing feels easy yet. The effort is still there. The resistance has not disappeared. But something important is developing beneath the surface. You are proving to yourself in small ways that you can act even when it is uncomfortable, that you are not completely controlled by your impulses. And that realization begins to build a different kind of confidence. Not loud, not obvious, but steady. It comes from experience, not from thinking about what you could do, but from seeing what you actually do. As the weeks turn into months, the changes become more stable. Discipline begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a routine. You don't have to think as much about doing the hard thing. You simply do it. The hesitation is still there at times, but it does not control you the way it used to. You have faced it enough times that it has lost some of its power. Tasks that once felt overwhelming now feel manageable. Confidence starts to build in a different way. It is not based on outcomes or external validation. It comes from knowing that you can rely on yourself. That when something needs to be done, you will do it. That when things become difficult, you will not immediately step back. This kind of confidence is quiet. It does not need to be shown or proven to anyone else. It exists in the way you carry yourself, in the way you approach challenges, in the way you respond to pressure. As this continues over a longer period of time, the shift becomes deeper. You begin to notice that your relationship with difficulty has changed completely. You are no longer avoiding hard things by default. In some cases, you start moving toward them because you understand what it leads to. You begin to see challenges as opportunities to grow rather than obstacles to avoid. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop needing everything to feel right before you take action. You move forward because that has become your standard. This is where the identity shift takes place. It is not a sudden transformation. It is the result of repeated actions over time. You are no longer someone who is constantly seeking comfort. You are no longer reacting to every feeling that comes up. You are no longer fragile when things become difficult. Those patterns lose their hold on you because you have replaced them with something stronger. You have built a different way of operating, one that does not depend on how you feel in the moment. You become more controlled, not in a rigid or forced way, but in a stable and grounded way. You are able to act without being pulled in every direction by impulses. You are able to stay focused when things are not easy. You are able to make decisions based on what matters, not just on what feels good in the moment. This control creates a sense of calm, a sense that you are not at the mercy of your environment or your emotions. You become more resilient. Challenges still exist, difficulties still appear, but they no longer have the same impact on you. You are able to absorb pressure without breaking. You are able to stay steady when things become uncertain. You recover faster from setbacks. You keep moving forward even when things do not go as planned. This resilience is built through experience, through facing discomfort again and again until it no longer feels unfamiliar. And there is a certain kind of strength that begins to show itself. You become dangerous in a quiet way, not dangerous to others, but dangerous to the limitations that once held you back. You are no longer easily controlled by comfort, by fear, by hesitation. You are able to act when others stop. You are able to continue when others quit. And that difference separates you, not because you are fundamentally different from anyone else, but because you chose to train yourself in a way that most people do not. There is a perspective that has been shared by philosophers who understood the role of difficulty in shaping a person. Seneca spoke about how challenges strengthen the mind in the same way that resistance strengthens the body. He saw hardship as something that reveals what you are capable of, something that builds character, not something that takes it away. When you begin to experience this directly, it stops being an idea and becomes something real. You see how facing difficulty changes you, how it builds something inside you that cannot be developed in comfort. At this point, the difference between two paths becomes very clear. Most people will stay where they are. They will continue choosing what feels easy. They will continue avoiding what feels difficult. And over time, that choice shapes their lives. It keeps them within certain limits. It keeps them from experiencing what they could become. Discomfort demands something from you. It demands effort even when you are tired. It demands discipline even when you don't feel like it. It demands that you move forward without waiting for the right conditions. And most people are not willing to meet those demands consistently. They choose the path that requires less, the path that feels easier in the moment. But if you accept those demands, if you decide to face discomfort instead of avoiding it, something changes. You begin to separate yourself from that pattern. You step into a different way of living, one where your actions are not controlled by what feels easiest, one where your growth is not limited by your comfort, one where you are actively shaping who you become. This separation does not happen all at once. It builds gradually, through the choices you make every day, through the moments where you could take the easy way out and choose not to, through the times where you act despite resistance. Each of those moments moves you further away from the version of yourself that avoids, and closer to the version that acts. And eventually it becomes clear, comfort is easy, but everything you want in life exists on the other side of discomfort. Most people enter a new year chasing results they haven't built the foundation for. They write goals, buy planners, make promises, and within a month, the momentum dies. The Stoics would say it's because the focus is in the wrong place. You can't control the future, but you can master the day. That's where real change happens. The future isn't some distant miracle waiting to be unlocked. It's the sum of the tiny, disciplined days you repeat when no one's watching. So this isn't another list of resolutions or hacks, it's a 12-week Stoic blueprint to reinvent yourself from the ground up in 2026. 12 weeks of focus divided into 3 parts: building your foundation, expanding your capacity, and integrating it all into something that lasts. Instead of chasing motivation, you'll build momentum. Instead of vague goals, you'll track proof. Because when you fix the structure of your days, the shape of your life starts to follow. Here's what this journey looks like. In the first 4 weeks, you'll rebuild your base, your sleep, movement, attention, and energy, so your mind has something steady to stand on. In the next 4, you'll expand, training your body, practicing courage, sharpening your skills, and keeping the promises that earn self-respect. And in the final 4, you'll make it durable, building systems that protect your progress, align your time with your values, and turn this short reset into a repeatable rhythm for the rest of the year. You don't need to be perfect to start. You only need to decide that this version of you, the one who's scattered, tired, or stuck, isn't the one who will run 2026. This plan asks for no grand declarations, just consistency. One honest day repeated enough times to prove who you really are. If you follow it, by the end of week 12, you'll feel it. More energy in your body, more calm in your mind, more control over your time. And something else, evidence. Proof that you've stopped chasing the idea of a new you and started living as one. Everything strong is built on stability. Before you can change your mind, you have to steady your body. Before you can shape your destiny, you have to master your days. Most people try to think their way into discipline, but the truth is simpler. When your body is chaotic, your thoughts will be too. The Stoics understood this. They didn't start with lofty philosophy. They started with the basics: sleep, breath, food, movement, and rhythm. This is your foundation. Without it, every goal collapses under its own weight. So, these first 4 weeks aren't about becoming someone new. They're about becoming someone steady. Someone whose life has a rhythm, a pattern, a center that doesn't get thrown off every time something small goes wrong. Week 1 is all about energy. If your energy is low, your willpower will always feel broken. Most people think they have a motivation problem, but what they really have is an exhaustion problem. You can't pour from an empty cup. So the first task is brutally simple. Fix your sleep and protect your mornings. Choose a wake-up time and stick to it for all 7 days. Not when you feel like it, not when the alarm feels kind. The same time, every day, like a promise to your future self. When your wake-up time is stable, your body starts to trust you again. Your hormones, your energy, even your mood begin to follow a rhythm. You stop crashing in the afternoon, you stop waking up in a fog, and you stop living in survival mode. Before anything else in the morning, step outside. Get sunlight in your eyes for at least 5 minutes. It doesn't matter if it's cloudy, the light still reaches you. This one act signals to your body that the day has begun. It resets your internal clock and makes it easier to fall asleep later. While you're outside, breathe deeply. No phone, no noise, no rush. Just the simple act of being alive before the world begins. Then drink water. Real water, not caffeine. Hydration is energy. Your body runs on it more than it runs on willpower. Next, move. You don't need an expensive program or gym membership to begin. Start by walking. Walk 30 minutes every day, even if it's broken into 2 smaller walks. On 2 of those days, add a simple strength routine. Push, pull, squat. That's it. You don't need to destroy yourself. You need to build a habit of motion. Exercise is not punishment, it's maintenance. When your blood moves, your mind follows. The Stoics saw the body not as decoration, but as the servant of reason. A tired, neglected body becomes a noisy master. A trained one becomes a quiet ally. Each morning before the day pulls you in, take 10 minutes for a Stoic ritual. Close your eyes and picture what could go wrong today. Someone might frustrate you, something might break, you might fail at something small. Then remind yourself that all of these things are outside your control, but your reaction is not. After this short reflection, write down your top 1 task. The single action that would make today a victory if you completed it. Then choose your virtue for the day. Maybe it's temperance, so you practice restraint. Maybe it's courage, so you say what needs to be said. Maybe it's justice, so you treat others with fairness even when you don't feel like it. Maybe it's wisdom, so you think before you act. Carry that virtue in your mind throughout the day like a compass. The rule for this week is simple. Off by 9, on by 9. At 9 at night, all stimulation ends. No screens, no late night scrolling, no, just one more video. Let your body cool down, and let your mind disconnect from the noise. At 9 in the morning, be awake and moving. If you only master this single rule, you'll already be ahead of almost everyone. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Don't chase perfect days, chase better mornings. Week 2 is about control. Once you stabilize your body, you have to stabilize your mind. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control, the most powerful mental tool ever discovered and the most ignored. The idea is painfully simple. Some things are within your control, and some things are not. Your peace depends entirely on which category you focus on. Most people lose their calm because they try to command the uncontrollable. What others think, how fast results come, what random strangers do or say. The more you fight these things, the more exhausted you become. Each morning, take one small page and draw a line down the middle. On the left side, write 3 things you can control today. On the right, 3 things you cannot. Be honest. I can control my effort at work. I can't control how my boss reacts. I can control my words. I can't control how they're received. This simple act rewires your brain. You start to separate facts from feelings. Beneath that list, write 1 small action you'll take on something you can control and 1 act of acceptance for something you can't. Maybe you'll choose to finish that project you've delayed. Maybe you'll choose to stop arguing with someone who doesn't want to listen. That's real strength, redirecting energy away from battles that can't be won. Now plan for the moments when your habits crumble. Everyone has triggers. Boredom, anger, stress, loneliness, name them. Then decide in advance what you'll do when they arrive. If you feel the urge to scroll, stand up and take a slow breath instead. If you feel like arguing, close the screen and walk away. If you feel overwhelmed, write down what's bothering you in 1 sentence. This is not about never feeling emotion. It's about never letting emotion drive the car. You're training yourself to be the calm person in the storm. Each night, spend 5 minutes reflecting on your day. Ask yourself, what did I do well? Where did I slip? What will I do differently tomorrow? Don't shame yourself, just observe. You'll notice patterns, the same mistakes, the same wins. Over time, you'll start predicting them before they happen. That's wisdom in action. You're no longer reacting to life, you're responding to it. By now, you'll notice a sense of control returning. You'll care less about what you can't influence and more about the few things that truly shape your day. When you master this, anxiety starts to fade. It doesn't disappear, it simply loses authority. You begin to realize that peace isn't about silence, it's about control. Week 3 is about detoxing your attention. We live in a world designed to hijack our focus. Every notification, every headline, every short video steals seconds from your life, and seconds become years. The Stoics warned about this long before screens existed. They said, "It's not that life is short, it's that we waste much of it." This week is about reclaiming that wasted time. For 7 days, run what I call a dopamine diet. It's not about food, it's about stimulus. You'll remove or reduce the cheap pleasures that drain your discipline. Start with 3 rules. No social media before noon, no screens after 9 at night, and no mindless scrolling between tasks. Turn your phone to grayscale, dock it in another room, and set a 15-minute daily limit for social apps. If you catch yourself cheating, don't feel guilty. Just notice when and why. That's where your triggers hide. Now fill that empty space with something that nourishes you. Replace scrolling with walking. Replace endless videos with reading. Replace passively consuming with actively creating. Call a friend instead of texting. Write instead of posting. You don't need to live like a monk. You just need to become harder to distract. Every moment you take back from the algorithm is a moment you return to your own life. You'll probably feel bored during this week. That's normal. Boredom is the withdrawal symptom of overstimulation. But if you endure it, something changes. Your mind starts generating ideas again. Your focus stretches longer. Work feels easier. Reading becomes enjoyable again. You start noticing small details. The sound of your steps, the air in your lungs, the texture of silence. That's the sound of your nervous system resetting. Set one goal this week. Accumulate at least 60 to 90 minutes of uninterrupted deep work each day. It doesn't have to be heroic. Just pick one task and give it your full attention. Track your minutes. Write the number somewhere visible. Every day you increase it even slightly, you're proving to yourself that you can concentrate again. In a world addicted to distraction, focus is a superpower, and now it's yours. Week 4 is about structure. Now that your mind is clearer and your energy is steady, you need a system that makes consistency easy. Willpower fades, but structure remains. You're going to design your environment so the right actions happen automatically. Start by scheduling 2 deep work blocks per day. They don't need to be long, 45 to 60 minutes each. What matters is that they are protected. During these blocks, no messages, no notifications, no multitasking. One tab, one task, full focus. Before each block, take one deep breath, open your work, and start. Don't wait for inspiration. It arrives after you begin. After each block, write one line about where you'll start tomorrow. This small detail saves you from losing momentum and prevents the endless "what should I do next" paralysis. Now look at your workspace. Clear it. Remove anything that distracts you. Keep only what helps you work. A notebook, a light, maybe one symbolic object that reminds you why you started this journey. When you clean your space, you clean your mind. A chaotic desk is a reflection of a chaotic focus. Next, give your environment rules. If your phone keeps stealing your attention, move it far away. If your chair makes you slouch, change it. If your environment makes laziness easy, redesign it until discipline becomes the path of least resistance. Your surroundings shape your behavior more than motivation ever could. Build a world where doing the right thing feels natural, not forced. At the end of this week, measure what's real. Don't ask, "Do I feel better?" Ask, "Am I sleeping consistently? Am I moving daily? Is my focus longer than before? How many times did I break the no-screen rule? How many minutes of deep work did I accumulate?" You're collecting evidence of change, not feelings about change. You're learning that progress isn't dramatic, it's quiet. By the end of these 4 weeks, you'll have built a foundation most people never take the time to build. Your body will feel more reliable. Your mind will feel clearer. Your focus will start to stick. You'll know exactly what's in your control and what isn't. You'll have energy that doesn't rely on caffeine, a schedule that supports your goals, and a growing sense of calm you didn't have before. You'll also have something much rarer, trust in yourself. That trust is what the next stage builds on. Because once you've learned to stabilize, it's time to expand, to grow stronger, braver, and more capable than you've ever been before. Now that your foundation is solid, it's time to build on it. You've stabilized your energy and sharpened your attention. Now you must expand what you can carry. The next 4 weeks are about growth, but not the loud, flashy kind. This is about quiet power, strength without anger, courage without noise, skill without vanity. You're not chasing excitement anymore. You're building capacity. You're learning to live bigger, move better, and act with greater integrity. This is the part where your identity begins to catch up with your actions. Week 5 is about strength. Not just physical strength, but the kind that trains your will through your body. Every time you lift, carry, or move something difficult, you're teaching your mind that resistance is not a threat, it's a teacher. The Stoics believe that the obstacle is the way, and the gym is a perfect metaphor for that truth. Every rep is a small act of defiance against weakness, laziness, and self-doubt. Your only goal this week is to show up. 3 times per week, train your full body. Push, pull, squat, hinge, and carry. Keep it simple. Push-ups or bench press, pull-ups or rows, squats, deadlifts or hip hinges, farmer carries or weighted walks, nothing fancy. You're not performing for anyone. You're building reliability. You're sending a message to yourself, I can do hard things on schedule even when I don't feel like it. Temperance is the virtue guiding this week. Consistency over intensity. Most people start strong and quit when progress slows. Don't. Keep the weights light enough that you can finish every set cleanly. Leave a little in the tank. Add only a small amount of weight or 1 extra rep each week. Growth built slowly lasts. Don't train with anger. Don't use pain as motivation. Train calmly. Breathe through your nose. Control every rep. You're teaching your nervous system to handle pressure without panic. That's discipline without rage, and it's rare. Follow one small rule. Never miss twice. If you skip a workout, fine. Just don't skip the next one. If you overeat, fine. Make the next meal clean. Progress isn't destroyed by mistakes. It's destroyed by quitting after them. The same applies to nutrition. Eat real food, drink water, and keep it boring. Every meal needs some protein. Eggs, meat, fish. Stay hydrated. Cut liquid calories. A strong body starts with strong fuel, not caffeine and hope. When you feed yourself like someone you respect, your body responds. You start standing taller, breathing deeper, thinking clearer. By the end of this week, you'll feel it. Not just in your muscles, but in your mindset. You'll start to associate effort with peace instead of stress. You'll realize that doing the hard thing calmly makes you unshakable, and that is the beginning of strength. Week 6 is about courage. If strength builds the body, courage expands the soul. Courage is not something you wait to feel. It's something you practice like a muscle. The only way to become brave is to do small, brave things on purpose over and over. The Stoics never glorified fearlessness. They admired the person who felt fear and still acted with reason. So that's what this week is for. Deliberate courage practice. Every week from now on, you'll do one thing that scares you. One courage rep. Something that feels uncomfortable that you've avoided because it's uncertain, awkward, or might make you look foolish. The size of the challenge doesn't matter. The act of choosing it does. Courage doesn't mean jumping out of planes or fighting battles. It means sending that message you've delayed. Asking the question you've been afraid to ask. Sharing your ideas before they're perfect. Showing up somewhere alone instead of hiding behind someone else's presence. If it makes you nervous, but you know it's good for you, it counts. Think of courage like a ladder. At the bottom are small discomforts, like speaking up in a meeting or telling someone the truth instead of what they want to hear. In the middle are things like applying for something you might not get or admitting you were wrong. At the top are things that could change your life, confessing love, quitting what's killing you, moving toward a dream even when it's uncertain. You don't need to climb to the top right away. You just need to climb one rung higher than last week. When you do these courage reps, expect your mind to rebel. Expect fear to disguise itself as logic. Now isn't the right time. I'll do it next week. I need to prepare more. Those are lies fear tells you to stay in control. The Stoics knew fear is just imagination, pain in advance. The only cure for imagined pain is real action. After each rep, take a few minutes to reflect. How did you feel before? How do you feel now? Fear always exaggerates the size of the risk. Once you do the thing, you'll see it was smaller than you thought, and you were bigger than you imagined. That realization is fuel. Courage doesn't remove fear, it shrinks it until it fits in your hand. Week 7 is about skill. By now, you have energy, strength, and courage. The next step is competence, the satisfaction that comes from getting good at something meaningful. You'll dedicate these 4 weeks to one focused skill sprint. It doesn't matter what you choose, a creative craft, a professional skill, or something entirely personal. What matters is that you practice it deliberately, not randomly. Most people dabble. They work without a plan, confuse busyness with progress, and wonder why they never improve. You're going to do the opposite. Choose one skill and practice it every day for 60 to 90 minutes. 80% of that time should be drills, breaking the skill into pieces and mastering them in isolation. The last 20% should be application, putting those parts together in a real project. If you're a writer, rewrite a paragraph 10 different ways, then use what you learned in your next page. If you're editing videos, practice cutting one scene 10 times faster, then build an actual sequence. If you're learning sales, practice the same opening lines until they sound natural, then use them in a real conversation. This approach turns repetition into mastery. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful. Improvement hides in boredom. In those moments when you keep showing up even though no one's watching and nothing feels exciting. Keep a scoreboard. Track how many sessions you complete, what drills you did, and what changed. Don't measure feelings, measure output. Even a 2% improvement each week compounds into something unrecognizable by the end of a year. Once a week, find someone better than you and ask for feedback. Be specific. Don't say, "What do you think?" Ask, "What confused you?" or "What would make this stronger?" Then apply one piece of advice immediately. The goal is not to be perfect. It's to shorten the distance between mistakes and correction. The faster you close that loop, the faster you grow. At the end of this week, you'll notice something subtle. You'll stop needing constant praise. You'll start enjoying the work itself, the rhythm, the precision, the small wins. Skill building becomes a form of meditation. You'll realize that excellence isn't about being better than others, it's about becoming undeniable to yourself. Week 8 is about integrity. The Stoics called this virtue justice, not just fairness toward others, but honesty with yourself. It's about being reliable, both inwardly and outwardly. The last 4 weeks of expansion are meant to strengthen your relationships, the one you have with others and the one you have with yourself. Start with this rule, 2 non-negotiables every day. 1. Keep one promise to yourself. 2. Do one act of service for someone else. That's it. The promise to yourself could be anything. Finishing a task, training even when tired, waking up on time, or reading a chapter instead of scrolling. The service could be small, sending a kind message, helping a friend, thanking someone sincerely. These small acts rebuild your integrity brick by brick. Each time you follow through, you deposit self-respect. Each time you help someone quietly, you deposit humanity. Together, they form character. Alongside these daily actions, you'll start practicing restraint in communication. Not every argument deserves your energy. You don't have to attend every fight you're invited to. Learn the art of tactical silence, the power of not reacting. When someone tries to pull you into negativity, choose peace. It's not weakness, it's control. You'll be amazed how much strength you regain when you stop defending yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Set boundaries that protect your time and sanity. Learn to say no, not rudely, just clearly. I can't commit to that right now. That doesn't align with my priorities. I'm offline after 9. These sentences are shields. They don't push people away. They keep your energy directed toward what matters. Every no you give to what's meaningless is a yes to what builds you. As you practice this, notice how much quieter life becomes. You stop checking your phone constantly because your peace no longer depends on external noise. You start enjoying solitude because it no longer feels empty. It feels earned. You realize that integrity is freedom, the freedom of knowing you are who you say you are, even when no one's watching. By the end of week 8, you'll look back and see progress you didn't expect. Your body will feel stronger and lighter. Your courage threshold will rise. The skill you chose will show tangible improvement. You'll carry yourself differently. Not with arrogance, but with grounded calm. You'll feel less reactive, more deliberate. You'll realize that you've built something deeper than habits. You've built reliability. Strength gave you confidence. Courage gave you expansion. Skill gave you pride. Integrity tied it all together. These 4 weeks are where your life starts to widen. You can carry more responsibility without collapsing. You can face more fear without freezing. You can do more meaningful work without distraction. You can give more to others without losing yourself. That's real growth. And yet growth alone isn't enough. Strength without direction can turn into restlessness. Discipline without reflection can harden into rigidity. Courage without wisdom can turn into recklessness. That's why the next phase is not about more effort. It's about integration. You'll learn how to make all of this durable. How to protect what you've built when stress hits, when life shifts, when motivation fades. Because the real test of self-mastery isn't how high you rise, it's how steady you stay. You've built strength, you've practiced courage, you've honed skill and earned a sense of self-trust that most people never experience. But now comes the quietest, most important part of the journey, the integration. Because growth without stability eventually collapses. Energy without rest burns out. Progress without reflection turns into noise. This final stage is where everything you've built becomes part of you. The goal is not to push harder, but to make what you've built unbreakable, to carry it into the chaos of life without losing it. If part 1 was about stability and part 2 was about expansion, part 3 is about endurance, about creating a rhythm that survives real life. You're not reinventing yourself anymore. You're reinforcing yourself. The habits are set, the mind is clearer, the body is strong, and the will is tempered. Now you'll test it all. In stress, in time, and in identity. Week 9 is about stress and recovery. Every system breaks at its weakest link, and stress exposes that link. So instead of avoiding stress, you'll use it as a teacher. Most people react to pressure with panic, but you're going to approach it differently. You'll meet stress the way a stoic soldier meets a storm, prepared, steady, and unafraid. First, learn your body's warning signs. Notice the tightening in your chest before it becomes anger. Notice your breathing when tension rises. Does it become shallow, rushed, or held? Notice your jaw when you're frustrated, your posture when you're anxious, your thoughts when things go wrong. These signals are not the problem, they're information. They're your body saying something needs your attention. Now decide what you'll do with that information. Write a short response map for yourself. 3 steps you'll take when you feel the spiral begin. Maybe it's to pause and breathe slowly through your nose for a full minute. Maybe it's to take a 5-minute walk outside, or to write down everything on your mind instead of letting it bounce around inside your head. Maybe it's to delay replying to that message until your hands stop shaking. The point is not to stop feeling stress, that's impossible. The point is to stop letting stress choose your response. To train this calmness, you'll practice what's called stress inoculation. Once a day, do one small thing that's uncomfortable but safe. Take a cold shower for 30 seconds. Hold a plank for 1 minute longer than you want to. Walk in silence without your phone, even if it feels restless. These aren't random challenges, they're controlled tests. They remind you that you can feel discomfort without losing composure. The mind learns, I can stay still under pressure. But stress alone is only half the equation. The other half is recovery. Without recovery, effort turns into exhaustion. So every day this week, schedule deliberate stillness, at least 15 minutes with no input, no noise, no agenda, no podcast, no scrolling, no background music, just you, your thoughts, and your breath. At first it'll feel uncomfortable, like boredom, like wasted time. But then, something happens. Your nervous system begins to reset. You start thinking clearer, sleeping deeper, feeling calmer. Recovery isn't idleness, it's the soil in which strength grows. Sleep remains sacred. Keep your routine consistent. You've come too far to start stealing hours from the night. Every skipped hour of rest steals clarity from tomorrow. So keep the same rule, off by 9, on by 9. Protect your energy like it's gold, because it is. Without it, your discipline dies. By the end of this week, you'll see that stress no longer owns you. You've learned to bend without breaking, to pause without quitting. You're no longer a victim of pressure. You're proof that calm can coexist with chaos. Week 10 is about mastering focus and time. Now that your inner state is steadier, you'll learn to structure your time so that life stops feeling like an emergency. Because even when you have good habits, a disorganized schedule will still make you anxious and reactive. Time management is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters and cutting what doesn't. Start by designing your default week. Picture a blank 7-day calendar. Fill it with the routines that keep you grounded. 2 deep work blocks per day, training 3 times a week, walks, meals, reflection time. These are your anchors. Everything else, meetings, errands, chores, social plans, must fit around them, not the other way around. Most people do the opposite. They fill their calendar with noise, then try to squeeze growth into the gaps. That's why they never feel in control. Next, align your tasks with your energy. Notice when you think best, when you crash, and when you recover. If you're sharpest in the morning, protect those hours for your most meaningful work, the tasks that move your life forward. Use afternoons for routine or collaborative work, and evenings for rest or reflection. Don't fight your natural rhythm, design around it. Productivity isn't about pushing harder. It's about using your peaks wisely and forgiving your valleys. Now simplify your inputs. You don't need to respond to everything the moment it arrives. Check messages at fixed times instead of all day. Turn off notifications that don't contribute to your goals. Set boundaries with your devices. Every interruption costs focus, and focus is your most precious currency. Imagine your attention as a beam of light. Every notification scatters it. Your goal is to narrow that beam until it's powerful enough to burn through distraction. This week, commit to one guiding rule. If it's not on your calendar, it's not real. If something matters, schedule it. If something drains you, remove it. Don't rely on memory or mood. The calendar is your shield against chaos. As your schedule stabilizes, you'll notice an inner calm. Each day will have shape. You'll wake knowing what to do, when to do it, and when to rest. The brain loves clarity. It hates uncertainty. Give it a clear path, and it will work with you, not against you. Time mastery isn't just organization. It's philosophy in motion. You're treating each day as a finite resource, a piece of life that deserves purpose. And when time has purpose, life feels meaningful. That's how the Stoics lived. Present, deliberate, aware that every hour was a gift. Week 11 is about values and alignment. By now, your routines are strong and your days are structured. But even good habits can become meaningless if they aren't guided by something deeper. You can be efficient and still feel empty. That's why the Stoics always brought everything back to virtue. Virtue means living in harmony with your values, doing the right thing, the right way, for the right reason. So this week, you'll define what right means for you. Take out a page and write down your core values, no more than 5. Not the ones that sound impressive, but the ones that actually matter to you when no one's watching. Courage, honesty, patience, creativity, service, discipline, whatever feels true. Then, under each one, write what it looks like in behavior. For example, courage, I say what I believe, even if it's uncomfortable. Temperance, I stop work when it's time to rest. Justice, I do what's fair, not what's convenient. Wisdom, I reflect before reacting. Now write what violates those values, the taboos that break your integrity. This contrast is powerful because it gives you clarity in moments of confusion. When faced with a hard choice, ask, does this honor my values or betray them? That one question will save you from countless regrets. Next, practice making decisions using 3 simple tools. First, the pre-mortem. Before committing to something, imagine it going wrong. What would cause failure? What could you do now to prevent it? Second, the regret test. Will you regret not doing this in a year? If yes, act. If no, let it pass. Third, the fence. Define automatic yes or no rules that prevent indecision. For example, if it interferes with my morning deep work block, I decline. These simple frameworks keep you consistent with your higher self instead of your moods. This week also begins scoring your virtues each night. Courage, temperance, justice, wisdom. Rate each from 1 to 5 and write a short note of evidence. Courage, 3. Spoke my mind but softened my words too much. Temperance, 4. Stopped scrolling at 9:05. Justice, 5. Kept my promise. Wisdom, 4. Waited to respond until I calmed down. This is not self-criticism. It's measurement, a mirror that keeps you honest. Over time, you'll notice which virtues you naturally embody and which need more attention. Virtue isn't built by grand gestures. It's built by small alignments repeated daily. Living by values gives meaning to your progress. Without them, habits become hollow, just motion without direction. But when every action echoes your values, discipline feels peaceful. You stop chasing external validation because your reward is internal coherence. You're not trying to please anyone. You're trying to respect yourself. Week 12 is about identity and renewal. Everything up to this point has been practiced. Now you'll take what you've built and make it permanent. Not through intensity, but through awareness. Begin with a review, an honest one. Sit down with a blank page and divide it into 4 boxes: wins, misses, lessons, and adjustments. Be specific. What did you accomplish? Where did you fall short? What did you learn about yourself? What will you change in the next cycle? Write it plainly, without pride or shame. This isn't judgment, it's data. The Stoics journaled every night for this exact reason, to close the loop between intention and action. Next, gather your proof. List the tangible evidence that you've changed. Your improved sleep, your deeper focus, your courage reps, your strength progress, your new habits. Print it, write it, or keep it in your phone. Something you can look at when doubt creeps in. That list is your armor. It's the proof that you don't just wish for growth, you build it. Now create your identity statement. Start with the words, I am the kind of person who, and finish the sentence. I am the kind of person who keeps my word. I am the kind of person who trains even when tired. I am the kind of person who chooses calm over chaos. Write at least 5. Read them every morning. These aren't affirmations, they're reminders of evidence you've already lived. The more you act in alignment with them, the more they become truth. As this 12-week cycle ends, design the next one. Choose a new theme, maybe focus, discipline, service, or courage. Set 3 minimum floors you'll never drop below, no matter how chaotic life gets. 7 hours of sleep, 1 act of movement, 1 promise kept. Then set 3 stretch goals, targets to chase, not to worship. This balance keeps you grounded and growing at the same time. Finally, mark this transformation with a quiet ritual. You don't need a ceremony or applause, just do something that symbolizes renewal. Maybe a long sunrise walk where you leave your phone behind. Maybe cleaning your space until it feels new again. Maybe writing a letter to your old self, the version of you that started this journey, and thanking them for showing up. That letter closes a loop. It says, you didn't just dream about change, you did the work. The purpose of these 12 weeks was never perfection. It was proof. Proof that you can rebuild your life through structure, patience, and deliberate action. That you can suffer stress without losing peace, work hard without losing presence, grow without losing gratitude. Now you've experienced it firsthand, and the beauty of this system is that it never ends. You can run this blueprint again and again. Every cycle deepens your self-mastery. Each one refines your discipline, strengthens your courage, and quiets your mind. In 12 weeks, you've done what most people avoid for a lifetime. You've built a system that makes improvement inevitable. You've learned that happiness doesn't come from chaos or freedom without structure. It comes from the calm that follows discipline. You've learned that success isn't found in grand gestures, but in small actions done consistently. You've learned that real peace isn't the absence of struggle, it's confidence in your ability to face it. When you look back at where you began, tired, distracted, uncertain, you'll see how far you've come. And when you look forward, you'll know that there's no going back. Because once you've experienced what it feels like to be in control of your time, your body, and your mind, you can't return to a life of aimless noise. You've crossed the line between wishing and becoming. You're now the kind of person who follows through, who takes responsibility for their day, who doesn't panic under stress, who lives by values, not moods, who builds peace, not excuses. That is what it means to live stoically in the modern world, not coldly, but consciously. To stand firm in chaos, to move with purpose, and to remember that strength, courage, wisdom, and justice aren't words on a page. They're actions you repeat until they become instinct. So as you step into the next season, remember, there's no finish line, just cycles of refinement, 12 weeks at a time. 12 weeks to rise, 12 weeks to rest, 12 weeks to reinvent again. Because life, when lived deliberately, is built in seasons, not resolutions, not trends, but steady renewals of character. And the best part is that you've already proven you can do it. The person you are now is evidence enough. You've learned to master your body, to direct your attention, to carry strength without anger, and to meet fear with courage. You've turned learning into living, and now, as you move beyond this plan, you carry something that can't be taken from you. Self-respect earned through consistent action. No one can hand that to you, and no one can steal it. You built it, and once built, it lasts a lifetime.